This story starts as our MC. Kneeling in a daze, he wonders if he has truly reincarnated into the world of his favorite game. Legendary weapons and mystical grimoires appear before him, representing the complex systems of this fantasy world. Transitioning back to reality, a weary salaryman walks past a brightly lit convenience store in the quiet night. He finally returns to his modest apartment, sighing with exhaustion while dropping his bags on the floor. Personal time officially begins as he eagerly powers on his handheld console to escape his mundane reality. Surrounded by clutter and snacks, he immerses himself deeply into the beloved digital world of his choice. On the screen, the grand entrance ceremony at the academy marks the start of the new academic year. With a triumphant fist pump, he celebrates starting his 42nd consecutive playthrough of the massive RPG. Familiar dialogue boxes pop up as characters discuss their nervous anticipation for the upcoming entrance exam results. Even in his stressful office environment, the mere thought of his favorite game provides a necessary mental escape. Relaxing at home with a cold drink, he finds comfort in the repetitive loop of the gameplay. This unique RPG allows players to forge deep romantic bonds with various heroines throughout the sprawling story. Within the academy walls, the head instructor prepares to announce the top-performing students from the difficult exams. Tension fills the classroom as the students wait breathlessly to see where they stand among their peers. A bright smile crosses his face when the familiar sequence he has been waiting for finally appears. Sitting amidst piles of trash, he identifies the four central figures who will drive the main narrative. Uranus is introduced as the fifth-ranked student, specializing in powerful magic and possessing a gentle charm. Nagisa Sekai takes fourth place as a skilled swordswoman with a sharp gaze and an intimidating presence. Aerys Centuria enters the spotlight as the third-ranked student, a gentle monk framed by blossoming flowers. Then comes the Academy's top student, Leon Brave, a magic swordsman and descendant of the legendary hero, whose primary quest involves raising intimacy with various heroines while preparing to defeat the ominous Demon King. Alongside numerous sub-events that offer depth to the world beyond the main narrative path, and uncovering these hidden secrets remains one of the most rewarding aspects for dedicated players, especially since character costumes and graphics shift dynamically based on the choices made throughout the journey. Yet the most significant factor behind the game's massive success is its bold adult content, featuring explicit scenes and romantic encounters that push the title into the adult-rated category, which clearly leaves our protagonist in a state of dazed, blushing euphoria as he continues playing. His thumbs moving rapidly across the console as he pushes through the most intense parts of the game, eventually reaching a scene where Leon relaxes in bed surrounded by a group of affectionate heroines. For the perfect blend of serious RPG mechanics and suggestive themes kept players thoroughly obsessed. As he enthusiastically gestures toward his massive collection of figures and memorabilia displayed on the shelves, prompting the series to expand into anime and manga adaptations, including edited versions for all-age audiences. However, a sudden piercing headache strikes him, forcing him to clutch his brow in physical distress, grimacing as he realizes that the lack of sleep and excessive gaming might finally be taking their toll. He slumps over his desk, struggling against an unfamiliar sensation of exhaustion that he has never felt before, ultimately choosing to surrender to sleep by lying down right there on the floor beneath his gaming setup. Meanwhile, a mysterious figure in a long coat walks through a grand hall, posing a cryptic question about games. As Leon cheerfully greets Zenon, the protagonist who takes over the lead role in the game's sequel. The sequel to Dungeon Brave's Soul begins immediately after Leon seals away the ancient Demon King, centering on a new protagonist named Zenon, who takes the lead in this darker second installment. Zenon initially integrates himself into the group, befriending Leon and joining the heroine's battle party. However, the dynamic within the fellowship starts to shift in a subtle and unsettling direction. Heroines begin to distance themselves from Leon, their attention turning away as he stands confused, revealing a shocking and twisted secret that completely redefines the nature of their once noble bonds. Zenon sits triumphantly atop a pile of captured heroines, having systematically stolen them from his friend. The game delves into explicit and controversial themes as the heroines fall under Zenon's corruptive influence. A sinister grin spreads across Zenon's face, relishing in the complete betrayal of the original hero. Leon watches in absolute horror as the women he once trusted are taken by his rival. Left utterly isolated and broken, Leon is driven to the brink of madness by the psychological torture. He screams in desperate agony begging for the psychological nightmare to end. Dark energy begins to swirl around the fallen hero as he reaches out in a daze. Lone and desperate, Leon enters a dark cave where the ancient evil remains locked away. Driven to self-destruction, Leon throws open the massive gates to release the sealed Demon King. Cataclysmic energy erupts as the world shatters into complete and total oblivion. The once heartwarming tale of love and battle transforms into a depraved and cruel tragedy. Our gamer stands in a void, declaring his absolute hatred for the sequel's dark NTR plot. Suddenly, a hand reaches upward toward a beautifully decorated and unfamiliar ceiling in a grand room. He gazes around in confusion, wondering where he is as he wakes up in a luxurious palace. Waking up in an unfamiliar, lavishly decorated chamber, he realizes this certainly isn't his messy apartment. Observing his lean, muscular torso in disbelief, he questions how his body could have changed so drastically. Scanning the incredibly luxurious surroundings filled with gold trim and expensive furniture, he feels completely out of place. Glancing toward a massive, ornate mirror mounted on the wall, he prepares to see his own reflection. Pacing past a high-end sofa with plush cushions, his confusion regarding the situation continues to mount rapidly. Catching a glimpse of himself in the glass, his eyes widen in pure, unadulterated shock at the stranger. Gripping the side of the mirror frame tightly, he wonders what has happened to his very soul. Staring back at a face with messy hair and a dark, intense gaze, a terrifying realization hits him. Horrified to see the face of Zenon Baskerville in the mirror, he realizes he has become the villain. Sinking to his knees in total despair, he laments being reborn as the person he hates the most. Leaning against the wall while sweating profusely, he desperately tries to reconcile his memories with this nightmare. Looking at the mirror once more, he curses his fate for placing him inside the body of a predator. Recalling his past life as a lonely gamer, sleeping under a table, he feels a deep sense of irony. Grimacing as he looks down, he wonders how he will ever survive in this dark, twisted game world. Questioning why he had to reincarnate into such a loathsome character when so many others were available. Envisioning Zenon's cruel reputation as a man who preys on innocent women in the original game story. Contrasting his new identity with the noble hero Leon, who is always surrounded by loyal, happy companions. Screaming out in the darkness of his mind, he wishes he could have at least been the original hero. Suddenly, a maid quietly enters the room carrying fresh laundry, her arrival breaking his spiraling train of thought. Turning around with a startled expression, he realizes he is still half naked in front of the unexpected visitor. The maid blushes and nervously apologizes for entering without permission, begging for her master's forgiveness. She suddenly offers herself for punishment, unbuttoning her uniform to reveal her submissive intent. Zenon recoils in absolute shock as she continues to strip right in front of him. Exposing her back, she prepares herself for the harsh discipline she has clearly grown used to. Visible scars mar her skin, providing horrifying evidence of the original Zenon's repeated and cruel abuse. His fist trembles with suppressed rage upon realizing the disturbing history of the body he now inhabits. He nearly gags from intense disgust, struggling to stay composed while facing this horrifying truth. Clenching his eyes shut, he desperately tries to process the dark reality of his new life. Moving fast, he throws a cloak over her shoulders and firmly tells her to get dressed immediately. Outside the window, Zenon's voice echoes as he promises never to raise a hand against her again. He then selects a set of dark clothes, preparing to face the outside world for the first time. The maid looks up expectantly, waiting for her master to assign her the day's first duties. Zenon pauses, suddenly realizing that his servant is remarkably beautiful when viewed without his past biases. Glancing at the luxurious room, he asks for the current date to confirm his place in the timeline. She informs him it is April 5th, year 101, which is the exact start of the story. The grand entrance ceremony at the Royal Sword and Magic Academy is scheduled to begin this very day. Zenon smiles knowingly, recognizing this pivotal moment from the game he mastered in his previous life. Students gather at the Academy's gates, signifying the start of a brand new adventure for everyone involved. He realizes with excitement that his own school life officially begins on this momentous morning. However, her question about skipping his daily training leaves him feeling completely bewildered and caught off guard. The maid explains that the original Zenon never missed a single morning of rigorous and dedicated training. Zenon reacts with genuine surprise, finding it hard to believe such a cruel villain was so diligent. reflecting on the game's depiction of him as a lazy antagonist who relied solely on dark magic. She politely offers to prepare a large breakfast if he truly intends to skip his morning routine. However, he decides to head to the training grounds, curious to test the true extent of his powers. Entering a desolate courtyard filled with ancient stone pillars and weathered paths under a bright sky, he notices massive impact craters etched into the walls, evidence of incredibly intense and destructive physical power. Surveying the silent ruins, he begins to realize the immense effort the original owner put into his craft. His eyes wander toward a rack of finely crafted practice swords, selecting one that feels oddly familiar. Standing amidst the rubble while his maid watches nearby, he prepares to test his inherited muscle memory. Drawing a sharp blade from its holder, he feels a strange, electric hum resonating through his palm. A sudden sense of focus washes over him as the surrounding world begins to fade into insignificance. Despite never holding a real sword, his arm moves automatically with expert precision and immense strength. Sunlight glints off the polished steel, highlighting the deadly potential of the weapon in his hand. He executes a series of experimental swings, cutting through the air with a loud and rhythmic sound. A small, confident smirk plays on his lips as he begins to genuinely enjoy the physical sensation. Complex movements flow effortlessly, proving that this villain's body is a highly tuned and dangerous instrument. Tightening his grip on the leather-wrapped hilt, he feels the weight settle perfectly into his stance. Flexing his fingers, he marvels at how quickly his consciousness is syncing with this physical form. He concludes that he feels completely at home in this powerful body, ready to change his destiny. Zenon stands in the training grounds, realizing that his current strength required more than just simple innate talent, looking deeply contemplative as he processes the physical capabilities and muscle memories etched into his new body. He observes a long line of wooden targets marked with black crosses, standing ready for magical practice. Raising his hand with calm focus, he unleashes a powerful burst of dark magic while shouting the spell. The target instantly shatters under the intense impact, leaving behind only splinters and a mysterious dark liquid. Satisfied with the violent display, he notes that this body can effortlessly execute high-level dark magical arts, yet he struggles to understand why someone so incredibly hardworking would ever choose to become a villain. Reflecting on the original Zenon's disturbing history of stealing the hearts of women through cruel sexual manipulation, he gazes up at the vast, cloud-filled sky, his mind racing with many possibilities for his new life. Pausing his training to rest, he puts a hand to his chin while a sudden realization hits him. He recalls that today is the Academy's grand entrance ceremony, occurring just before the game's official opening. With a renewed sense of purpose, he vows to avoid the sequel's dark developments and support Leon, imagining a bright future where he can finally enjoy a peaceful and carefree school life without conflict. His focus is suddenly broken when a maid approaches, carefully carrying a bowl of fresh water for him. He wipes sweat from his brow and offers a polite word of thanks to the startled servant. The maid stands perfectly still, her eyes wide with total disbelief at her master's unprecedented gentle behavior. Zenon continues to dry himself off with a towel, completely unaware of the emotional impact of his words. Turning back toward her with curiosity, he wonders why she is suddenly frozen in place like stone. She nearly faints from the sheer overwhelming surprise as another maid rushes over to support her sagging form. Addressing her kindly by name, he sincerely expresses his deep gratitude for Leviana's constant and selfless devotion. Zenon continues his heartfelt thanks to Leviana, hoping she will continue to support him in this new life. Because he refuses to become the same cruel villain from the game and intends to reform himself now, Leviana begins to weep uncontrollably with joy, overwhelmed by receiving such kind and unexpected gratitude from her master. Her heart overflows with pure happiness as she realizes that today has become the greatest day of her life. She clutches his hands while tears stream down her blushing face, finally feeling that her long years of devotion were rewarded. Zenon asks for her continued assistance moving forward, which she accepts with absolute enthusiasm and a deep, respectful bow. Soon after, the prestigious Baskerville family crest is displayed as preparations for the Academy's grand entrance. Ceremony are finalized. Zenon stands ready in his sharp new school uniform next to an incredibly ornate carriage waiting in the courtyard. Leviana waves a handkerchief frantically while shouting her farewells at the top of her lungs with tear-filled eyes. Feeling slightly embarrassed by her intense display, Zenon boards the carriage and wonders if she is perhaps being too dramatic. As the carriage begins its journey, he reflects on the original Zenon's history of violence and his own sudden change. She continues to scream loudly for his safety and successful return, ignoring the presence of the calm head butler nearby. Sitting inside the lavishly decorated interior, a blushing Zenon urges the driver to depart quickly to escape the scene. The heavy carriage wheels begin to turn against the cobblestone path, signaling the official start of his academy life. Leaning his head on his hand, he deeply contemplates exactly how much of the original game's plot he should follow. The narrative shifted toward the academy's opening, where Leon Brave is destined to spend 2 years preparing for battle. Zenon crosses his arms while wondering if he can remain a simple classmate without getting tangled in the main scenario. He reaffirms his personal distaste for the sequel's dark themes, stating his strong preference for honest and pure romance, recalling the tragic ending where a desperate Leon releases the Demon King after losing everything he once held dear. The world is ultimately engulfed in a massive magical explosion, resulting in the total destruction of the entire kingdom. Zenon resolves to avoid stealing the heroines while his carriage moves toward the prestigious Magic Academy, intending to ignore the game's dark script and wait for Leon to eventually defeat the Demon King, declaring firmly that he will never follow the path of the original villainous Zenon Baskerville. As he finally arrives at the grand gates of the Royal Academy of Sword and Magic, standing before the massive institution, he takes a deep breath, realizing his new life is beginning. His inner gamer excitement peaks as he looks at the actual stage of his favorite RPG. With a determined expression, he prepares to enter the school and change his fate forever. However, he immediately feels a wave of pathetic nervousness wash over his usually composed villainous face. Walking through the hallways he explored countless times digitally, he marvels at the realistic academy grounds. Suddenly, he notices a student looking at him with absolute terror, as if seeing a monster. She scrambles away in a panic, her frantic footsteps echoing his bad reputation among the students. Clutching his face in frustration, he realizes his scary appearance instantly kills any festive mood. He recalls the upcoming orientation and the legendary social gathering where Leon meets the main heroines. A dark, habitual smirk crosses his lips as he anticipates the iconic scenes from the original game. Nearby, a group of girls huddles together, trembling violently at the mere sight of his presence. Reaching out to apologize, he only makes matters worse as they cower from his reaching hand. His natural villainous face creates a terrifying aura that he cannot seem to hide from others. The girls are left completely traumatized, sobbing as they mistake his confusion for a sinister threat. He realizes the weight of the original Zenon's sins, acknowledging that their fear is entirely justified. Sighing, he walks away while students flee, vowing never to smile in public to avoid scaring anyone. The Grand Academy towers loom overhead, signaling the start of the important orientation ceremony for all new students. Inside the massive lecture hall, Zenon sits in total isolation as other students intentionally avoid his menacing aura. He facepalms in despair, lamenting how quickly he has become a social pariah on his very first day. Meanwhile, he tries to convince himself that being a lone wolf is actually a much more dignified path. As students settle into their desks, the official ranking ceremony begins to unfold within the quiet hall. The headmaster adjusts his monocle before addressing the crowd to present the top-performing students of the year. Furthermore, a bright and energetic girl named CL stands up proudly when called for 5th place. Zenon watches intently, recognizing the first of the major heroines he once saw through a digital screen. Sil Uranus is introduced as the lively daughter of a frontier noble and a talented attack mage. Specifically, her history reveals her as Leon's childhood friend, who personally encouraged him to enroll. Zenon nearly loses his composure from pure fanboy joy, blushing intensely at her overwhelming charm and cuteness. Following her, Nagisa Sekai is announced, a stoic samurai daughter possessing hidden darkness and incredible sword skills. Then Aerys Centrea takes 3rd place, a high-ranking noble priestess known for her remarkable grace and beauty. Briefly, he recalls the game's original dark path, where these girls became the broken victims of his cruelty. However, he confidently dismisses those thoughts, vowing that such a tragic future is now completely impossible. The atmosphere suddenly tenses when the announcer declares Zenon Baskerville himself as the 2nd-place student. He can't help but giggle with delight while secretly admiring how cute the heroines look in real life. Despite his resolve, he weighs his desire to approach them, against the risks of altering the game's plot. Abruptly, the headmaster's expression turns sharp and angry, silencing the room with a wave of unexpected hostility. Zenon blinks in confusion, wondering what could have possibly provoked such a sudden and intense reaction. Students stare in silent judgment as Zenon remains seated, creating a thick and uncomfortable atmosphere in the hall. Zenon sweats profusely, realizing too late that his failure to stand up has been misinterpreted as a protest. Whispers ripple through the crowd as classmates gossip about his family's dark rumors and alleged criminal ties. He panics internally while the headmaster looks on with growing irritation at this perceived display of noble arrogance. The headmaster sighs in disappointment, clearly fed up with what he assumes is another spoiled noble's poor attitude. Addressing Zenon directly, the headmaster warns him that despite his status, all students are equal within these walls. Zenon feels the weight of the social catastrophe. Realizing his simple mistake in timing looks like calculated defiance, he hesitates to move now, fearing that a delayed reaction will only make him look even more pathetic. In his mind, he sees visions of being bullied and mocked if he dares to break the current tension. Deciding to play along, he bows his head and offers a formal apology to avoid any further public scrutiny. An eerie silence descends upon the lecture hall as everyone processes his surprisingly humble and submissive response. He notices the main heroines glancing back at him, their beautiful faces filled with confusion and wary curiosity. The headmaster stares him down, wondering if this notorious villain is being genuine or merely acting out of spite. Tension remains high as the headmaster grips his podium tightly, clearly unmoved by Zenon's sudden display of politeness. Zenon screams internally, terrified that his naturally scary face is making his sincere apology look like a threat. Finally, the headmaster dismisses the matter for now, but issues a stern warning about his future conduct. The sudden conclusion leaves Zenon reeling in shock, unable to believe how quickly his first day went south. He spirals into a mental abyss of despair, lamenting that a simple lack of reflexes caused this catastrophe. Blushing with embarrassment, he tries to justify his slow reaction by blaming his unfamiliarity with his new name. The ceremony continues as the top student, the legendary hero Leon Brave, is officially called to the stage. Leon Brave is called to the stage, introduced as a commoner-born magic swordsman destined for heroic greatness. Zenon blushes with fanboy excitement, finally seeing the legendary protagonist he controlled through countless virtual playthroughs. Following his introduction, the heroic young man turns a sharp and intensely cold gaze toward his future rival. Feeling a sudden chill, Zenon wonders why Leon already looks so incredibly angry despite their lack of history. Leon then approaches the podium to deliver his freshman representative speech, while the entire hall watches in silence. Zenon worries his earlier rebellious behavior annoyed the hero, while Leon expresses his deep honor for being there. Leon humbly attributes his success to his hard-working parents and the noble patronage of Earl Uranus's generous family. Meanwhile, Zenon crosses his arms. Amused that Leon's modest speech differs from the typical hero king boasts, the hero continues by declaring his love for the peaceful Slayer's kingdom and his desire to defend it. Pumping his fist, Leon vows to grow powerful enough to eradicate any evil that torments the innocent. Zenon nods approvingly like a proud mentor, clearly satisfied with the hero's noble and inspiring declaration. The narration notes that destiny remains fixed even if the players inhabit the roles of simple classmates. Zenon's expression suddenly shifts to one of total bewilderment as he senses something very wrong occurring. Whispers fill the lecture hall as the students begin to murmur about the growing tension between them. Leon closes his eyes for a moment, gathering his magical presence into a sharp and focused point. Zenon freezes when he realizes that the legendary hero has officially marked him as a primary target. Staring directly into Leon's piercing eye, he questions why he is being judged for sins not yet committed. He panics internally, sweating as he feels the heavy weight of the protagonist's direct and unyielding hostility. A theory forms about how the game's settings might be forcibly connecting the first and second installments. He wonders if this pre-programmed hatred is why Leon treats him like a villain, regardless of his actions. If Leon follows the script, there is still no guarantee he will secure a happy ending. Because if the hero is defeated, the entire world will surely meet its tragic demise. Soon after the ceremony concludes, the headmaster instructs all the freshmen to move to their new classrooms. As he walks through the academy halls, Zenon observes his classmates starting to form their social circles. Realizing his existing game knowledge may now be useless, Zenon decides to exert the maximum effort possible. He firmly vows to avoid interfering with Leon, seeking nothing but a quiet and peaceful school life. However, Leon turns back and glares with an intensity that seems to pierce through Zenon's very soul. Zenon is left speechless by the hero's unexplained hatred, wondering why he has become an immediate target. In his mind, he imagines a scenario where joining Leon's party becomes necessary to prevent a catastrophe. Despite the hero's current anger, Zenon knows he must play his role perfectly to ensure everyone's survival. He nods to himself in satisfaction, convinced that staying in the background is the smartest path forward. Even though they are now fellow classmates, he remains determined to keep his distance from the protagonist. Zenon blinks in surprise as he notices a strikingly beautiful woman standing at the front of class. The room fills with an anxious buzz of whispers as the students react to their teacher's presence. Leon remains stoic and keeps his eyes closed, seemingly uninterested in the commotion around him for now. Abruptly, the hero's eyes snap open and fixate directly on Zenon, with a terrifyingly focused intensity. Zenon panics as he realizes the hero has him completely locked on before anything has even happened. He questions why Leon is already showing such hostility, feeling the pressure of the hero's focused gaze. Once the school day ends, Zenon returns to the massive Baskerville estate via luxurious horse-drawn carriage. Leviana greets him with an overflowing joy, her face flushed red as she experiences her master's unprecedented kindness. Leviana informs Zenon that his father, the head of the house, is urgently waiting for him in the office. Hearing that name sends a shiver down his spine as he prepares to face Garandolph Baskerville, a man known as the kingdom's underworld king who controls crime guilds and manages illegal slave trades. Realizing he cannot avoid his own father regardless of his desires, Zenon heads toward the inevitable confrontation. He stops before the heavy double doors, clutching his fist as he braces for the man's overwhelming presence. After a sharp knock, a cold voice from within grants him permission to step into the lion's den. Entering the vast, book-filled study, he formally greets the terrifying man who rules over their dark lineage. Suddenly, a vortex of lethal dark magic erupts, sending conjured chains spiraling through the air with violent intent. Before he can react, the restrictive, bloody chains snare him tightly, drawing blood and pinning him down. He falls helplessly to the rug, immobilized while his father stands over him with cold indifference. The looming silhouette of the Baskerville patriarch greets his son with a chilling and heartless welcome. Zenon grinds his teeth against the searing pain, gasping for breath while the dark energy drains his strength. Garandolph reveals his scarred face, radiating an aura of absolute authority that demands total and absolute submission. The binding magic continues to constrict with a sickening sound, further trapping the young man in his father's grasp. Lying prone on the floor, he curses the literal torture session his father considers a standard greeting. The head of the family mentions the recent entrance exam results, clearly dissatisfied with his son's second-place performance. He roars with disappointment, demanding to know how a Baskerville failed to claim the top spot at school. Garandolph declares that their family must be the absolute strongest to maintain their reign over the shadows. Gasping for air while blood drips from his face, Zenon barely remains conscious under the brutal physical pressure. Finally, the tyrant orders him to take the top rank next time or face even harsher consequences. Zenon stumbles out of the office, bloodied and exhausted from his father's brutal and unexpected magical treatment. Leviana gasps in absolute horror upon seeing her master in such a miserable and wounded state. His strength fails him completely as he collapses onto the expensive carpet while she rushes to his side. She cradles his head with tears in her eyes, desperately pleading for him to stay conscious for her. Reaching quickly into her apron, she prepares to administer emergency first aid to the battered young noble. He barely swallows the restorative potion as she carefully pours it into his mouth to heal him. Silence falls over the grand Baskerville estate as night settles under a vast field of brilliant stars. His eyes snap open in the dark, his mind racing with the heavy events of the previous day. Sitting up in his plush bed, Zenon notices that the magical damage to his body has entirely vanished. He discovers Leviana sleeping peacefully right beside him, having stayed awake all night to watch over his recovery. Watching her quiet face, he acknowledges her kindness and wonders why she serves such a cruel family. He contemplates the irony of a pure soul being wasted on a villain like the original Zenon. The memory of his father's cold-hearted torture causes him to wince and clutch his aching shoulder. As the clock ticks forward, he begins to deduce the true origin of Xenon's descent into madness. Garandolf looms in his mind as the absolute source of every evil within the Baskerville bloodline. He realizes that his predecessor was likely driven insane by his father's constant and systemic psychological abuse. Visions of a terrified younger Xenon emerge, reflecting a childhood filled with endless suffering and lonely despair. This psychological trauma is what eventually triggered the villain's destructive behavior toward the protagonist and various heroines. He compares his isolated life to Leon's bright existence, where the hero is beloved by everyone around him. Leon is destined to defeat the Demon King and gain everything that the lonely villain truly lacks. Xenon reflects on how the original version of himself harbored an intense, burning jealousy toward the heroic Leon. Recalling the game's dark script where he was destined to systematically seduce and capture various heroines like CL, he clenches his fist tightly, feeling the lingering weight of his predecessor's twisted and obsessive emotions. However, he makes a firm decision to establish a new, noble goal for his life in this world. Recognizing that there is someone far more dangerous than the Demon King who must be dealt with first. Darkness and uncertainty briefly cloud his thoughts as he considers the immense challenges that lie ahead of him. Specifically, he vows to eventually overthrow Garandolf, the man who represents the absolute worst of his lineage. Since he has been reborn, he intends to live freely and enjoy this world on his own terms. He declares his intention to defy the game's creators and the overbearing influence of his own father. As the sun rises, he observes his loyal maid sleeping soundly beside him until she suddenly awakens. He greets a startled Leviana with a gentle smile, making her realize he is safe and awake. Meanwhile, his loyal maid erupts into tears of relief, shouting for her master with overwhelming and unfiltered joy. She lunges forward to embrace him, pulling his head into her chest while sobbing from the emotional stress. Xenon is left completely flustered by her sudden and intense physical affection, his face turning bright red. Realizing her boldness, she panics and screams, her embarrassment matching his own as they scramble apart. That night, the Academy sits silently under the stars while he stays awake to plan his future. Sitting at his desk, Xenon begins to document everything he remembers about the game's complex mechanics and quests. His quill moves rapidly across the parchment as he records every secret item, location, and character event. He notes down specific weapon quests and class schedules using a combination of codes and game data, intentionally writing in Japanese to ensure his plans remain hidden from anyone else in this magical world. Xenon finally completes his secret manuscript written in Japanese to keep his future plans hidden from prying eyes. Standing alone in his silent chamber, he deeply contemplates the precarious nature of his new existence in this world. He identifies his father Garandolf as the primary obstacle he must eventually overcome to secure his own freedom. While considering deserting his family, he realizes that powerful assassins would surely hunt him down for such betrayal. Leon walks through the academy grounds, symbolizing the fixed path of the hero that Xenon must now navigate. He fears that diverging too far from the original story might render his precious game knowledge completely useless. A horrific vision of the world's destruction haunts him if the hero should ever fail his divine mission. Thus, he resolves to stay close to the main scenario to intervene should the timeline begin to fracture. Thinking back to his father's cruelty, he acknowledges the urgent necessity of developing his own individual strength. He summons his personal status screen to evaluate his current abilities and magical attributes within the game system. The mechanics reveal a system based on skill proficiency rather than traditional leveling to gauge a character's growth. Noting his starting job as a magic swordsman, he realizes he possesses the same versatile class as the hero. However, a sudden look of genuine confusion crosses his face as he notices an unexpected detail on the screen. He is horrified to discover a high level in the taming skill, a hallmark of the original villain's depravity. Clutching his head, he sincerely hopes that he will never find a reason to use such a loathsome ability. He attempts to locate standard game functions like saving or loading, only to find them completely absent here. Recognizing the vast potential for growth, he understands that mastering diverse new skills is vital for his survival. Xenon lists the specific rare items he needs to secure to boost his chances against the coming darkness. Items that enhance physical attributes or grant access to powerful new spells become his next logical objective. He debates whether to purchase these necessary supplies from a shop or search for them in hidden locations. Xenon analyzes his options for obtaining rare items, whether through dangerous dungeon crawls or high-stakes auctions. Although he notes that random drops make guaranteed acquisition quite difficult without significant financial resources, concluding that crucial event items should probably be left for the hero Leon to secure his victory, since hindering the protagonist's growth could inadvertently trigger a catastrophic game over for the entire world. But his tactical brainstorming is interrupted by a gentle knock as Leviana asks permission to enter. She presents a meticulously prepared breakfast, hoping the food will help heal his lingering physical pain. The tray contains specific recovery items from the game designed to restore health and cure ailments. Zenon accepts the meal with a genuine smile, admitting that he was actually quite hungry. Recognizing the restorative properties of the sandwich and coffee, he feels the depth of her concern. The simple act of receiving a morning beverage brings a moment of peace to his chaotic thoughts. Leviana blushes intensely and stammers, insisting that providing such care is merely her duty as a servant. Nevertheless, Zenon looks her in the eye and offers his sincere thanks for her constant hard work. The sheer shock of his kindness causes her to tremble as she struggles to process the praise. Suddenly, blood begins to drip rapidly from her nose as her excitement reaches a dangerous peak. Zenon watches in bewilderment as a puddle forms on the floor from her overwhelming physical reaction. Mortified by the mess, the maid screams an apology and bolts out of the room in panic. He sits alone, wondering if a simple word of thanks was really enough to cause a nosebleed. Realizing the intensity of her obsession, he feels a slight chill from the depth of her love. He concludes that the original Zenon already had a loyal ally and never needed to become a monster. As he finishes eating, he prepares himself for the social trials awaiting him at the academy. Zenon walks through the grand hallways of the Baskerville estate to begin his day. Meeting Zayas, the high-ranking butler who manages the house with strict adherence to family rules, who stops him to discuss the current state of his training and physical condition. Noting that Zenon skipped his usual morning practice, which prompts a concerned inquiry about his health. However, Zenon dismisses the worry with a sharp look, wondering if Zayas intends to report him. The butler reveals that his master expects his heir to grow into a suitably powerful leader. Bowing deeply while urging Zenon not to betray the high expectations placed upon his shoulders, Zenon remains silent, processing the pressure of living under his father's constant and suffocating scrutiny. As he departs for the academy, he tells Zayas that he will fulfill his obligations eventually. The butler watches him leave, questioning if the young master has a secret plan for gaining strength. Zenon declares that swinging a sword isn't the only path to becoming truly formidable in this world. 1 week passes quickly as the new students settle into the rigorous routines of academy life, during which time Leon continues to project an aura of intense, unexplained hostility toward his classmate. Zenon sits with his arms crossed, fully embracing his role as the isolated and mysterious villain. He ignores the constant whispering from other students who are still terrified by his very presence. Meanwhile, he finds the academic magic studies surprisingly easy, as the concepts feel like second nature. He chuckles to himself while anticipating the start of a specific high-reward lesson from the game. The instructor officially announces that today's class will involve the much-anticipated first foray into dungeon exploration. Zenon flashes a dark smirk, knowing this event is the perfect opportunity to test his knowledge. For dungeons in this world are unpredictable nests where treasure and monsters spawn in infinite complexity. The class arrives at a grand stone entrance meant for training students to handle dangerous dungeon monsters. A weathered sign above the heavy doors identifies this specific location as the Sage's Playground, which serves as the Academy's official tutorial dungeon for first-year students to test their early combat skills. The instructor explains that parties will enter the gates sequentially to begin their first practical training exercise. Standing completely isolated, Zenon confidently decides that he is more than capable of clearing this dungeon alone. He ignores the bustling activity around him, firmly believing that a solo run is his best option. Suddenly, a cold and distant voice behind him agrees that a partner is entirely unnecessary for them. Nagisa Seikai is a guarded swordswoman whose deep lack of trust keeps her distant from her fellow students. The flustered instructor pleads with them to reconsider, fearing the inherent dangers of entering a dungeon without support. Both Zenon and Nagisa simultaneously reject her proposal, preferring to face the coming challenges without any assistance. Zenon tenses up, realizing that interacting with a main heroine like Nagisa could dangerously derail Leon's future path. Sweating with anxiety, the teacher warns that the academy will not take responsibility for any reckless or fatal accidents. Meanwhile, the rest of the students cheer enthusiastically as they prepare to enter the portal in 10-minute intervals. The instructor clarifies that while the guild won't buy their loot, their performance will heavily impact their grades. A group of boisterous boys shouts triumphantly, eager to be the very first party to enter the abyss. Other students immediately begin arguing over the starting order, creating a chaotic and noisy scene at the entrance. The crowd devolves into a loud shouting match as everyone desperately tries to claim the first exploration slot. Zenon sighs in irritation, wishing the teacher had established a clear and orderly schedule to avoid this mess. Nagisa approaches him, coldly commenting on how frivolous their classmates are being regarding such a dangerous mission. He stares at her in genuine shock, realizing this is the very first time a peer has actually addressed him. Nagisa bluntly tells Zenon that his naturally villainous face is the reason everyone avoids him. He apologizes, but she explains she only approached him because he was the only student standing alone. Suddenly, Nagisa declares to the rowdy crowd that she will lead the first charge into the dungeon. She walks away while the class protests her selfishness, though Zenon finds her straightforward attitude quite admirable. The stoic swordswoman disappears into the dark stone corridor, leaving the rest of the students in confusion. Watching her departure, Zenon can't help but let out a small, genuine laugh at her bold behavior. Classmates begin to buzz with annoyance, calling her selfish and wondering what her deal actually is. Losing his patience with their indecision, Zenon shouts for everyone to settle the order with rock, paper, scissors. His sudden aggressive outburst terrifies the nearby students, causing them to jump in visible and comical fright. Chastened by his terrifying aura, the groups quickly huddle together to settle their petty disputes immediately. Hands are thrown in unison as the students finally engage in a competitive game of rock, paper, scissors. Having won his turn, Leon cheerfully waves to his friends before stepping into the mysterious dungeon depths. The instructor approaches Zenon, expressing her genuine surprise at his unexpected display of effective, if scary, leadership. She bashfully admits that his appearance and family reputation previously made even her feel quite intimidated. Zenon questions if going last is acceptable, since he intentionally opted out of the group games earlier. With a sharp and serious look, he ignores social standing to ask a very specific technical question. He inquires about the taxation laws regarding any treasures or rare items found within this training dungeon. The teacher explains that everything found is tax-exempt, though the monsters here are weak and items negligible. A wide, sinister grin spreads across Zenon's face as he realizes the massive profit potential of this information. He marches toward the entrance while the worried instructor screams for him to avoid any reckless solo actions. Zenon waves goodbye to the worried instructor, appreciating her genuine concern for even a social pariah like him. He recalls a dark scene from the game where the teacher was captured, promising to prevent such tragedy. Stepping into the darkness with a confident smirk, he officially begins his solo conquest of the tutorial dungeon. The stone doors loom behind him as he ventures deeper into the silent and narrow stone corridors. Multiple slimes emerge from the shadows to block his path, but he prepares an advanced dark magic spell. With a quick shout of Shadow Edge, he unleashes sharp blades of energy that slice through the enemies. The defeated slimes instantly dissolve into puddles, leaving behind various valuable materials and shining crystal fragments. Surveying the area from a distance, he confirms that his inherited combat instincts are functioning at peak performance. He picks up a drop material item, carefully examining its quality to gauge the potential profit from farming. Confirming that the dungeon layout and item drops perfectly match his vast knowledge of the original game mechanics. Continuing past flickering torches, he realizes that as long as he stays alert, this tutorial will be easy. More monsters ambush him from above, but he skillfully parries their attacks with effortless and fluid movements. Swiftly collecting the spoils of battle, he packs away the items to maximize his gains from this run. He channels his mana to light the way, revealing a horde of slimes waiting further down the path. Leaning against a pillar, he notes that these weaklings are nothing compared to the monster on the bottom. The hallway ahead is suddenly teeming with slimes, creating a wall of translucent jelly that blocks his progress. A mocking grin appears as he prepares to show them the overwhelming power gap between them and himself. He declares them to be mere small fry, igniting his blade with dark energy for a single decisive strike. Pushing off the ground with incredible speed, He launches himself toward the center of the enemy group. He charges directly into the massive horde, swinging his sword with lethal precision to clear the entire room. Zenon waves to the instructor, thanking her for the kind concern despite his notorious villain reputation, remembering her tragic fate in the original game, where she was inhumanely tamed in a dark basement. Focusing his mind on the immediate challenge, he prepares himself to finally conquer the tutorial dungeon's depths. He steps into the pitch-black corridor alone, fully aware of the dangerous trials awaiting him ahead. Encountering a group of low-level slimes, he calmly prepares to test his inherited magical and physical prowess. He unleashes a swift shadow edge, slicing through the jelly-like enemies with expert and cold precision. The defeated monsters dissolve instantly, leaving behind scattered remains on the cold stone floor of the corridor. Zenon stands triumphantly amongst the puddles of slime, confirming his absolute combat superiority in this early stage. He discovers a material drop known as a slime core, essential for crafting and gaining early game wealth. Noting that the dungeon's structure and items perfectly mirror his deep knowledge from his previous life, he proceeds further, confident that no traps or powerful foes can hinder a solo run through this area. Another wave of flying monsters attacks from the shadows, but he eliminates them effortlessly with high-speed strikes. After collecting the spoils of war, he stoically puts them away to maintain his efficiency during the crawl. Light magic illuminates his path, revealing the path toward the lower levels where greater dangers reside. He dismisses the weak enemies, focusing entirely on the formidable boss monster lurking at the very bottom. Meanwhile, the elite A-class students lie exhausted and injured, struggling to cope with the dungeon's harsh environment. Zenon watches from a distance, disappointed that the supposedly top-tier students are already in such a pathetic state. He contemplates the burden of incompetent teammates who would only serve to hinder his progress and survival. A pair of elegant shoes approach the wounded group as a voice promises to heal everyone in order. Aerys Centura uses her immense divine power to heal her classmates, showcasing the grace of a true saint. Zenon stands in the distance as Aerys looks on, her kindness shining despite his notorious and villainous reputation. Then he suddenly slaps his own cheeks to stay focused and avoid falling for her gentle charm. Recognizing that letting himself fall for a heroine would likely lead to a disastrous, world-ending event, he chooses to walk away quickly, leaving the saint and the other wounded students behind him. Yet Aerys calls out to him, addressing him formally as Lord Baskerville while he pauses. Knowing she is Aerys Centrea, the third-ranked student known for her unmatched divine healing powers, the saintly girl looks at him with a mix of sorrow and genuine concern, seeking his understanding. While other students tremble in fear at his presence, unable to handle his dark, intimidating aura, Zenon replies coldly, telling her that he has no need for her healing magic in this dungeon. But she smiles kindly, insisting that she cannot simply ignore those who are hurt or in need. He feels a surge of irritation at her self-sacrificing nature, finding it foolish and incredibly dangerous. Nonetheless, Aerys explains that making progress together is far more valuable than reaching the end alone. A sinister smirk crosses his face as he mocks her idealistic and naive view of the world, briefly recalling her lore as an embodiment of sacrifice who would throw her life away for others. Even when bloodied and exhausted, she continues to stand as a protective shield for her fellow classmates. He watches her intently, feeling a complex mixture of admiration and deep-seated annoyance at her actions. Staring deeply, he thinks that those who sacrifice their own happiness for others are essentially just fools. Consequently, he turns to enter the darker cavern, dismissing her ideals as nothing more than a fantasy. A small, cynical chuckle escapes his lips as he decides to leave the lecturing to the hero. Finally, he ventures deeper into the shadows, leaving the glowing figure of the saint behind in the distance. Aerys asks Zenon if something is wrong as he prepares to depart for the lower levels. He bluntly tells her to limit her self-sacrifice before walking away into the darkness. The dark dungeon corridor stretches ahead, leading deeper into the uncharted and dangerous territory. Zenon contemplates his role, realizing that saving the wounded saint is not his intended responsibility. Visions of Leon freeing Aerys from her chains of sacrifice remind him of the hero's path. Deciding to play the cool villain, he exits the scene to leave the heroics to others. Solitary stone steps lead further down into the lightless depths of the underground labyrinth. Reaching a massive vertical shaft, he surveys the vast and intimidating scale of the ancient ruins. A horde of horned rabbits on the fourth floor charges toward him with wild, hungry eyes. With a flash of his blade, he effortlessly carves through the pack of aggressive monsters. Zenon wipes his sword clean, noting that no other classmates have ventured this deep yet. He deduces that only Leon and the main heroines should have reached the lowest floor level. Carefully tucking a valuable material drop into his bag, he focuses on his final objective. Imagining the hero's party confronting the floor boss, he trusts in Leon's inevitable and scripted victory. Though feeling somewhat unsatisfied, he prepares to conclude his first successful and lucrative dungeon exploration. Suddenly, a desperate and terrifying scream echoes through the stone chambers, catching him completely off guard. The sound of a violent impact and frantic cursing rings out from behind a rock wall. Zenon realizes someone is in grave danger and struggling against a powerful and unexpected foe. He quickly sprints toward the commotion, hearing a strained voice shouting for everyone to fall back. Peeking around a corner, he finally witnesses a scene that leaves him completely shaken and horrified. Zenon watches in horror as two bloodied classmates struggle to survive an encounter with a powerful foe. Looming over them is a massive, winged gargoyle that definitely shouldn't be present on this high level. The beast slashes through the girl with lethal speed, leaving her comrade to scream in helpless desperation. A terrifying, distorted voice echoes through the cavern, signaling the monster's predatory and murderous intent. Sweating profusely, Zenon questions why this endgame boss has appeared so early in the tutorial dungeon. He recalls the original game's scenario, where Leon and his party were supposed to defeat this creature. Suddenly, it hits him that the gargoyle escaped from the bottom floor to hunt weaker students. The vast, dark emptiness of the dungeon mirrors the cold reality of the life-threatening situation unfolding. Leon and the main heroines stand frozen in total shock as they witness the unprecedented slaughter. The hero collapses to the floor, cradling his fallen friend while weeping with pure, unadulterated grief. Despite the overwhelming power gap, the brave student raises his shield to protect his trembling friend. His eyes widen in terror as he realizes everyone deserves a chance to live their own lives. Leon's agonizing screams fill the air, reflecting his absolute failure to save his beloved classmates. Zenon observes the carnage, considering if these deaths are truly necessary for the hero's ultimate growth. He visualizes the diverging paths of history, weighing the risks of interfering with the established main scenario. Clutching his head, he battles with the internal urge to intervene and disrupt the established story. Clenching his fist, he rejects the idea of running away and leaving his classmates behind to die. Huddled together in the corner of the cold cave, they wait for the monster's final, lethal strike. Suddenly, a massive shockwave of dark energy erupts, blasting the gargoyle backward with immense, crushing force. The survivors look up in utter confusion as a mysterious pair of boots steps into the light. Zenon stands firm against the screeching gargoyle, declaring that he isn't suited for a truly villainous role, silencing the terrified survivors with a single gesture as they realize the notorious Baskerville heir is their savior, shouting that he refuses to let his classmates die just to satisfy the original game's tragic script. Meanwhile, the monstrous gargoyle roars in fury, promising to make the arrogant human pay for his interference. Laughter erupts from Zenon as he recklessly charges forward, mocking the tutorial boss for its pathetic posturing. He declares himself a greater villain than any mere mob monster while preparing a lethal magical strike. The air whistles as his blade begins to find its mark against the creature's thick, leathery wings. Dodging a massive swipe, he watches the ground shatter while the beast lets out a piercing, high-pitched scream. With a swift and powerful horizontal slash, he attempts to carve through the monster's reinforced hide. However, the impact reveals that the gargoyle's skin is as hard as steel, frustrating his physical assault. Smirking at the challenge, he notes that this creature possesses the strength of a much higher-level endgame boss. Realizing his basic iron sword is completely useless, dark energy begins to swirl around his clenched fists. Suddenly, he unleashes the Shadow Edge spell, sending a barrage of dark magical blades toward his foe. The gargoyle shrieks in agony as the concentrated magical energy finally manages to pierce its dense armor. Analyzing the beast's stats, he determines that only a relentless magical barrage will overcome its physical immunity. The creature flails its massive wings in a desperate attempt to maintain its balance under the magical onslaught. Zenon maintains his intense focus, sensing the shifting flow of mana as the battle reaches a critical point. Clenching its muscular fist, the gargoyle prepares to launch a devastating counterattack to reclaim the momentum. Multiple stone-hard spikes are fired from the beast's body, raining down toward the young noble with lethal speed. The projectiles strike the cavern floor with explosive force, shrouding the entire battlefield in a thick cloud of dust. Zenon notes the gargoyle is normally fought by a party, but he's taking it on solo, preparing to end the life-or-death struggle with a single, perfectly timed critical strike. As the beast lunges forward with a massive, earth-shattering punch, effortlessly weaving through the assault while declaring his absolute knowledge of the monster's vital weak point, launching himself upward to drive his blade deep into the soft flesh under the creature's chin. Recalling that in this game world, every boss has a specific spot that guarantees critical damage, flashing a cruel smirk while mocking the event boss for falling to a supposed inferior. The gargoyle gurgles a final curse against humanity as steel pierces its throat. Before Zenon suddenly chants the name of a high-tier fire spell, Hell Flare, unleashing a pillar of incinerating flame that erupts directly from the beast's open maw. A series of violent magical explosions tear through the monster's remaining physical form. Boasting that the magic swordsman job is truly unrivaled as the strongest starting class, the massive guardian finally crumbles into pieces, signaling the definitive end of the tutorial threat, leaving behind only rising smoke and fading embers as the boss's body completely disintegrates. Scattered mana stones glisten on the cavern floor, rewarding the victor of the intense encounter. Zenon clutches his prize with a satisfied grin, marking his first true success in this world. Turning his attention back to the dark cave where his classmates are still recovering, the survivor desperately tries to administer a healing potion to his fallen, unconscious friend. Zenon raises a hand in a casual greeting, asking if everyone managed to survive the ordeal. The tearful young man expresses his profound gratitude to the man he once feared as a villain. Zenon gazes intensely at the aftermath of the battle, processing the gravity of the situation. Noticing the scattered, empty potion bottles littering the floor next to the wounded girl, he reaches into his pack and generously offers 2 fresh recovery items to the shocked student, who clutches the bottles with tearful eyes, worried he cannot afford to pay for such valuable help. However, Zenon dismisses the debt immediately, insisting that these items are merely cheap and common supplies. Expressing heartfelt gratitude, the boy prepares to administer the life-saving medicine to his unconscious partner. A gentle glow envelops the girl as the potent, restorative magic begins mending her severe injuries. Zenon turns to depart, satisfied that everyone has managed to survive the harrowing ordeal. The rescued student suddenly drops to his knees, bowing deeply to show his sincere appreciation. Telling them to forget it because they are classmates, Zenon maintains his cold yet helpful demeanor. The boy stares at the scorched earth, lamenting his carelessness in the monster's unexpected power. Zenon pauses to explain that the gargoyle was a rare irregular beyond any normal student's capability. Clenching his fists against the ground, the survivor blames his own weakness for endangering his comrades. Zenon advises him to transform that guilt into a resolve to protect his friends next time. The boy looks up in genuine surprise, moved by the villain's surprisingly wise and encouraging perspective. He vows to train harder, realizing he must become strong enough to stand beside someone like Baskerville. Walking deeper into the shadows, Zenon contemplates the long years of academy life still waiting ahead. The student offers a final bow, stammering out one more apology for his earlier behavior. He admits that his perception of the notorious noble was clouded by false assumptions and prejudice, confessing he believed the dark rumors about the Baskerville family until witnessing Zenon's true character today. Zenon offers a small, knowing smile as he accepts the sincere apology from the young student he rescued, silently acknowledging the irony of being called a good person despite his notorious villainous role and appearance, recalling how he risked everything to save them while everyone else in class chose to ignore him. The other students watch in silent contemplation as their classmate humbles himself before the powerful Baskerville heir, who bows his head in profound regret, desperately pleading for forgiveness for his earlier prejudices and cold behavior. Sighing deeply, Zenon looks away to hide his growing embarrassment from receiving such unfiltered and honest gratitude. Reflecting on how he has remained a loner at the academy until this very first genuine social interaction, he awkwardly pulls his collar up, shouting at the student to stop with the excessive and public praising. Tightly gripping the dark mana stone won from the battle, he prepares to move toward his next objective, reminding them that his scary face and his family's dark reputation remain harsh and undeniable facts of life. Zenon hands over a small vial, instructing the pair to use its contents to safely navigate their exit, identifying the gift as a potent monster, repelling incense designed to keep the lesser threats at a distance. Noting that while it only affects weak creatures, it is more than enough for this specific training dungeon. The young man promises with a bright expression that he will eventually find a way to repay him. Giving a casual thumbs up, Zenon tells him to pay it back once he finds success in the future. Meanwhile, a pack of fierce wolves is suddenly incinerated by a series of powerful and precise lightning strikes, leaving behind a trail of defeated monsters as Zenon reaches the final glowing exit of the deep tunnel. He finally arrives at the lowest level of the sage's playground, where the air feels heavy with magic. Entering a massive stone chamber, he spots a fellow student waiting in the shadows for the final trial. His eyes narrow with focus as he prepares to confront whatever challenges remain in this hidden basement area. Leon recognizes Zenon, his voice trembling as he questions the notorious Baskerville heir's presence. Alongside him, the main heroines stand ready for battle while looking visibly shaken after their narrow escape. In response, Zenon remains calm, acknowledging Leon's heroic lineage while checking if the trio managed to survive. However, suspicion clouds Leon's face as he wonders how Zenon could have possibly known about their struggle. Shrugging off the accusation, Zenon adopts a nonchalant attitude to maintain his mysterious and distant persona. He simply explains that a powerful monster appeared nearby and he assumed they had encountered it too. When Leon asks if Zenon was attacked, he learns that other classmates were unfortunately wounded instead. Suddenly, the weight of the situation hits Leon, causing him to stagger as his composure finally breaks. Covering his face in shame, the hero laments letting the monster escape and endangering his fellow students. At that moment, Ciel rushes to his side, desperately trying to reassure him regarding the recent tragedy. Regardless, Leon screams in agony, blaming his own perceived weakness for the suffering of his friends. Pounding the ground in total despair, he mocks his heroic heritage while drowning in feelings of powerlessness. Meanwhile, Zenon watches the breakdown in silence, his eyes fixed on the protagonist's raw display of turmoil. While Nagisa looks on with a grim expression, Leon continues to spiral into a pit of self-loathing. Feeling the heavy atmosphere, Zenon scratches his head as he contemplates the unintended consequences of his intervention. Historically, the original script required classmates to die for Leon to achieve his necessary and dramatic growth. Consequently, Zenon wonders if the hero can still reach his full potential after the timeline has been altered. Leon continues to curse his own failure, his fists trembling from the intense and overwhelming psychological pain. Zenon remains a silent observer, processing the visible gap between the game's script and this new reality. Finally, the heroines huddle around Leon, insisting that they all would have perished without his timely protection. Zenon resolves to focus on current actions rather than worrying about Leon's uncertain future path. A sharp voice interrupts his thoughts as Leon calls out his family name from behind. Turning back with cold indifference, he asks if the hero still has something to discuss. Leon remains silent for a moment, his expression filled with a complex mixture of lingering frustration. Scratching his head impatiently, Zenon urges him to speak quickly as he has other matters to attend. Unexpectedly, Leon breaks the heavy silence by offering a sincere and quiet word of thanks. Acknowledging that Zenon saved their classmates and handled the monster when the hero party failed, Zenon is left speechless when Leon performs a deep, respectful bow to express his genuine gratitude. Blushingly, Leon insists that he is simply following proper etiquette as a student of noble character. Before walking away, he warns that he still won't overlook Zenon's previous villainous actions. Zenon sighs in relief as the hero departs, feeling the immense weight of the social exhaustion. He begins to move through the corridor alone, his silhouette casting a long shadow on the stone. However, he suddenly stops when he notices the fourth-ranked student, Nagisa Sekai, waiting for him. Catching his attention with a sharp gaze, Nagisa blocks his path with an air of intense curiosity. She bluntly inquires if he was the individual responsible for slaying the powerful, irregular gargoyle. Flashing a confident and mocking smirk, Zenon challenges her by asking what her reaction would be. Nagisa observes him intently, noting that his aura feels significantly different compared to their other classmates. A bright and satisfied smile crosses her face as she confirms that her warrior instincts were correct. Expressing a desire for a future duel, She departs cheerfully while humming a light-hearted tune. Zenon scratches his head in exasperation, realizing he has caught the attention of another troublesome person. Zenon enters a quiet chamber where a glowing, ornate throne sits upon a stone dais. Approaching the seat of power, he discovers a beautifully decorated treasure chest waiting for him. Lifting the lid, his eyes widen at the sight of numerous silver coins filling the small container. Each shimmering piece is embossed with the symbol of scales, marking them as official Academy currency. He holds one aloft, celebrating a perfect dungeon clear without sustaining even a single scratch or injury. Observing the coin's detail, he realizes his thorough game knowledge has finally yielded its first tangible reward. Meanwhile, he wonders if Leon's group completely forgot to claim this important commemorative achievement medal. Leaning against the cold masonry, Zenon prepares to search for the dungeon's true hidden jackpot. His fingers trace the rough edges of the stone blocks, seeking a mechanism he remembers from the game. Exerting pressure on a specific brick, a rumbling sound echoes as a massive secret passage begins opening. A hidden vault is revealed, overflowing with a literal mountain of gold coins and legendary equipment. Zenon's face flushes with pure, unbridled greed upon seeing the vast riches hidden behind the wall. Reaching out with trembling fingers, he begins to sift through the endless ocean of shimmering golden metal. He practically dives into the wealth, his inner gamer rejoicing at such an incredible financial windfall. Mountains of coins, enchanted armor, and rare weapons sparkle under the magical lights of the secret room. The clinking sound of falling gold fills the chamber as he gathers his thoughts and his prizes. Amidst the currency, an unassuming yet intricately carved treasure chest sits partially buried in the pile. Triumphantly pulling out a special item, he realizes he has finally secured the legendary and versatile magic bag. This rare artifact allows the user to store an unlimited number of items within its mystical dimensions. Jumping for joy, Zenon declares himself an instant millionaire, ready to fund his future independence with ease. Zenon enthusiastically fills his new magic bag with a cascade of gold coins and valuable potions. The bag's interior glows with mystical light as it effortlessly absorbs the massive haul of treasure. Determined to leave nothing behind, he frantically stuffs every single coin and gem into the enchanted satchel. Rare artifacts, ancient scrolls, and powerful magic staves float amidst the shimmering piles of legendary loot. Amidst the vast hoard, he continues his frantic scooping to secure his future financial independence. Suddenly, a dark and ominous vein of energy begins to crackle with an unsettling magical resonance. The pulsating energy intensifies, sending a cold shiver through the air of the secret treasure vault. Zenon clutches his chest in sudden, sharp pain as a dark power begins to surge within him. His eyes fixate on a magnificent legendary sword, standing upright amidst the mountain of glistening gold. The blade is revealed as the Amino Habakiri Maru, a weapon of immense and terrifying magical potential. Red veins pulse through the sword's hilt like a living heart, reacting to Zenon's very presence. He recalls spending countless hours and a fortune in his previous life to forge this ultimate blade. This masterpiece is designed to eventually surpass even the legendary holy sword used by the game's hero. Raising the brilliant weapon high, a blinding pillar of light erupts to fill the entire chamber. Its lethality is unmatched, capable of dealing devastating damage to the Demon King even on hard mode. However, a lingering sense of unease washes over Zenon as he stares at the familiar blade. He begins to suspect that the treasures here are exact replicas from his own previous gaming data. Realizing the existence of these items suggests his specific playthrough has been manifested in reality. Staring into the dark abyss of the unknown, he wonders who could have possibly arranged this. Standing alone amidst the riches, he questions if his reincarnation was an intentional act by some unseen force. Zenon reflects on why he became the sequel's villain rather than the original game's hero, questioning what entity brought him here and how they accessed his personal save data. The sun shines brightly over the Academy towers as a new day of exploration begins. Students whisper in awe as Zenon exits the dungeon, his casual arrival drawing immediate attention. He nonchalantly tosses the commemorative achievement medal toward his flustered instructor while walking past. The coin shines in the light, representing a feat no other student has managed alone. Instructor announces Zenon Baskerville's official conquest of the tutorial dungeon, stunning the nearby students. Leon and Ciel stare in disbelief as the villainous classmate succeeds where they struggled. The class buzzes with rumors about how one person could possibly finish such an exercise solo. Zenon laments the necessity of returning to the dungeon, despite already defeating the scripted boss. His teacher grants him special permission to explore more advanced labyrinths beyond the school's boundaries. She warns him not to be reckless, reminding him of the gargoyle's unexpected and dangerous appearance. Walking through the grand city, Zenon realizes he must eventually find reliable comrades for survival. He examines his hoard of legendary gear, noting the skill requirements are still far too high. Grumbling to himself, he concludes that solo play has reached its inevitable and dangerous limits. Specifically, he fears being immobilized by status ailments without a healer to provide immediate support. Zenon affirms that party members are indispensable, though he remains a total social pariah. Watching Leon laugh with friends, he acknowledges the hero's natural advantage in building a team. Glancing at his ordinary classmates, he realizes none of them possess the strength he requires. He looks into the darkness, contemplating whether to hire professional mercenaries or purchase loyal slaves. Hireable sub-heroines exist as mercenaries, but their lack of loyalty makes them a risky investment. Because hiring individuals who might steal items or flee during battle is a gamble he can't afford, since dying in this world means a permanent game over with no option to ever continue. He concludes that reliable subordinates are essential for survival, even if he must purchase them. Zenon resolves to do whatever it takes to succeed, setting aside his past Japanese moral values. Traveling deep into the city, he arrives at the grand entrance of the subterranean slave auction. A smartly dressed attendant bows respectfully, recognizing him as the heir of the powerful Baskerville family. The worker escorts the VIP guest to a plush seat in the very front of the auditorium. Clinking ice in a fancy cocktail sets the mood for the high-stakes event about to begin. He reflects on the necessity of building an army to eventually confront his own tyrannical father. The clinking of his glass punctuates the rhythmic and heartless drone of the marketplace. The auctioneer takes the stage and officially welcomes the wealthy nobles to the prestigious gathering. A muscular male slave is presented first, showcasing his raw physical power to the interested bidders. Frantic bidding immediately erupts as prices soar through hundreds of thousands of gold pieces. Zenon watches the proceedings with intense focus, his sharp eyes evaluating everything he sees here. The audience erupts into cheers as the hammer falls, concluding the sale of a skilled warrior. A weary girl is sold for 800,000 gold, much to the crowd's vocal delight. Following her, a young blonde boy with striking blue eyes is brought out onto the pedestal. The atmosphere in the stadium reaches a fever pitch as the bidders shout their opening offers. Leaning back in his chair, Zenon lets out a bored sigh at the mediocre options provided. Zenon realizes his pockets are overflowing with gold coins retrieved from the secret treasure room earlier. Searching for a powerful subordinate, he hopes to find someone worthy of his substantial investment today. He reveals an antique monocle known as the God Eye, a valuable item from the dungeon hoard. Placing the magical device over his eye, he prepares to analyze the hidden stats of every slave. A line of shackled individuals stands before the crowd, each possessing their own unique traits and skills. The display reveals specific levels for charm and service, attributes that Zenon finds completely useless for combat. He scratches his cheek in disappointment, noting that none of these people possess any viable fighting skills. Reflecting on game mechanics, he knows that initial stats heavily influence a character's ultimate growth potential. Observing more candidates, he concludes that none of the current options meet his strict requirements for power. Deciding that his time is being wasted, Zenon prepares to depart the auction house in search of alternatives. He looks down solemnly, convinced that he must find a more reliable method to recruit strong allies. Suddenly, the auctioneer raises his hand and excitedly announces the arrival of the day's final rare slave. The presenter describes a girl from a scarce demi-human race found on the distant northern continent. Zenon starts to walk away through the bustling audience, his interest in the proceedings having completely evaporated. However, a sudden glimpse of the final slave causes him to freeze in absolute and utter disbelief. He recognizes the white-haired child as Orza White Ogre, a figure who shouldn't exist in this world. Staring intensely at her porcelain skin and snowy hair, he struggles to process her unexpected physical presence. The girl's golden eyes and small red horns confirm her identity as a legendary member of the ogre tribe. Zenon panics internally, knowing for a fact that Orza was never a character in the Dungeon Brave Soul game. He recalls her from a different war simulation title, wondering why she has appeared in this world's timeline. Zenon sweats as he realizes the world's boundaries are far more complex than he originally anticipated. Meanwhile, the auction erupts into a bidding war over the rare ogre tribe girl's high physical capabilities. Observing the distant skyline, he theorizes that the worlds of both game installments have secretly merged. This hidden connection between titles suggests a deeper lore that was never fully explained to players. Focusing his attention, he prepares to use the God Eye monocle to verify his growing suspicions. Another wealthy bidder raises the stakes to 5 million gold, fueling the hall's growing excitement. The magical device clicks as it scans for the hidden potential within the girl standing on stage. Zenon identifies 3 powerful combat skills, making her the ideal candidate for his future guard. Yet he hesitates, worried that purchasing her might irrevocably shatter the hero's intended narrative path. A heavy silence descends as he weighs the potential consequences of interfering with the game's story. Clenching his jaw, the internal conflict reaches a peak while he stares at the shackled girl. He surveys the greedy nobles around him, realizing the girl's fate is about to be sealed. Orza stands trembling in heavy chains, her eyes filled with a hollow sense of hopeless misery. The auctioneer roars as the price hits 6.5 million, seeking any higher challenges. The vast auditorium watches breathlessly as the bidding for the rare demi-human reaches its final phase. Large tears stream down the child's face, her silent weeping tugging at Zenon's lingering past conscience. Feeling a sharp pang in his chest, he realizes he cannot simply stand by and watch. Suddenly, a hand shoots upward as a cold voice boldly declares a bid of 10 million. The entire crowd gasps in absolute shock at the astronomical sum offered for the ogre girl. Zenon stands tall with his hand raised, officially claiming her as his own to defy destiny. Bidders gasp in shock as Zenon's astronomical 10 million gold offer completely disrupts the auction's steady rhythm. Walking confidently through the aisles, he ignores the whispers of nobles questioning his massive expenditure on a slave. For that same fortune could have equipped an entire elite party with the most powerful legendary endgame gear. Blushing slightly while looking down, he internally curses his own impulsiveness for creating such a public scene. Regardless, he knows that purchasing Orza might fundamentally alter the war and lead toward an entirely different future. Unable to ignore a known tragedy, he realizes he can never truly embrace the role of a heartless villain. Meanwhile, the auctioneer roars with excitement, challenging the wealthy crowd to surpass the young noble's staggering bid. Frustrated bidders exchange anxious glances, unable to comprehend why someone would pay such a price for one girl. A portly noble sweats profusely while trembling with rage, struggling to process the sudden increase in the asking price. The greedy man glares intensely at Zenon, who remains perfectly composed despite the growing hostility within the room. Lightning-like tension crackles between the rivals as they engage in a silent and fierce battle of pure wills. Leaning back in his seat, he smirks while knowing his own villainous face can easily win any staring contest. Orza watches from the stage with a look of hollow despair, her spirit broken by years of relentless suffering. Zenon offers a casual wave to the stage, attempting to ease the visible terror of the young demi-human girl. Her eyes widen in pure, unadulterated surprise as she struggles to process this strange and unexpected display of friendliness. Blushing deeply while fighting back tears, she wonders why this intimidating noble is fighting so hard for her. Zenon laughs softly and tells her to relax, claiming that he is simply here to provide her with salvation. Suddenly, his portly rival roars a new bid of 10,500,000 gold pieces in total desperation. The auctioneer enthusiastically gestures toward the new leader, asking if anyone else dares to challenge the current price. Without skipping a beat, Zenon coldly declares a final bid of 12 million gold to secure his victory. The portly noble grinds his teeth in sheer frustration, realizing he cannot match the staggering 12 million bid. Shocked murmurs ripple through the wealthy crowd as they process the unprecedented price paid for a single slave. Finally accepting his total defeat, the outmatched noble hangs his head in shame while the bidding officially ends. Zenon keeps his hand held high, projecting an aura of absolute dominance and victory over the entire auction hall. Thunderous applause erupts from the spectators as they celebrate the conclusion of the most expensive sale in history. Remaining perfectly calm, Zenon settles back into his seat and smirks at his successful acquisition of the rare girl. The grand auction tents loom tall against the dark sky, signaling the end of the public event's proceedings. Backstage, various costumes and props are scattered around, reflecting the heartless, theatrical nature of the human marketplace. Zenon adjusts his magic bag, preparing to finalize the transaction and claim his new subordinate from the officials. Entering the dressing room, he finds the small ogre girl standing alone and waiting for her new master. Unexpectedly, Orza introduces herself with a bright, blushing smile and asks for his kind guidance moving forward. Zenon recoils in shock, completely caught off guard by her sudden shift from a broken child to enthusiasm. She lunges forward and hugs his leg affectionately, showing a level of trust that borders on pure innocence. Looking up with shimmering eyes, she vows to work her absolute hardest for the man who saved her. He recalls her original game description as a cold and expressionless doll, finding this reality completely different. In his mind, she resembles a happy, wagging puppy rather than the terrifying war machine from the legends. Zenon stands frozen as he struggles to reconcile her bubbly personality with the dark rumors of her tribe. She nuzzles against him with a contented expression, seemingly oblivious to her master's growing internal confusion and worry. Her golden eyes sparkle with a newfound sense of hope as she grips his coat tightly with her small hands. He concludes that walking around with such a happy slave will only make his villainous reputation look more suspicious. Zenon asks the auction official for a change of clothes to properly dress his new acquisition, patting Urza's head while explaining they cannot return to the estate in her current tattered state. The official agrees with a greasy smile, leading the young demi-human toward the backstage waiting area. A simple curtained room serves as the temporary holding area for the various slaves awaiting their purchase. However, the girl clings to her new master in fear, refusing to follow the stranger alone. Zenon gently reassures her that he will wait right here, finally convincing the trembling girl to move. Waving a hand dismissively, he watches as she is led away to finally replace her dirty rags. He then sits in isolation, reflecting on the sheer absurdity of the world's twisted and heartless social systems. A cheerful voice eventually rings out from behind the fabric, signaling that the transformation is finally complete. A pair of shiny new leather shoes step onto the checkered floor, gleaming under the dim interior lights. Zenon roars in absolute disbelief upon realizing that she only changed her footwear and kept her rags. Orza poses proudly in her new shoes, claiming she is happy with just this simple and small upgrade. Her bare legs contrast sharply with the polished leather as she admires the very first gift she received. Sighing at her naive logic, Zenon decides not to argue and focuses on her heavy slave collar. He inquires about removing the metallic restraint, which clearly displays his own family name as her owner. The official immediately warns against such a reckless action, explaining the harsh laws regarding masterless and unprotected slaves. Removing the mark of ownership would strip her of any remaining legal protections within the kingdom's borders. Zenon questions the specific nature of the danger, while the official describes the lack of basic human rights. In this cruel society, ownerless slaves are often subjected to unchecked violence and kidnapping on the open streets. The merchant emphasizes that a rare ogre tribe girl would be an immediate target for every opportunistic predator. The official explains that the collar serves as essential protection against kidnappers who prey on masterless demi-humans. Zenon scowls as he recalls the kingdom's discriminatory laws regarding the low social standing of subhuman races. He notes that constant conflict with elves and dwarves has fostered a culture where non-humans lack basic rights. Orza grabs his hands with a beaming smile, insisting that she doesn't mind staying shackled for his sake. She gleefully points to the heavy metal band, viewing it as a precious symbol of belonging to her master. Feeling flustered by her enthusiasm, Zenon looks away and mutters that they should just drop the subject now. The merchant offers them a private chamber for some quiet time, assuming the young noble has specific desires. With a greasy wink, the official shuts the heavy wooden door, leaving the two completely alone together. Zenon realizes the man completely misunderstood his intentions upon seeing the room's lavish heart-shaped bed and furniture. Turning back toward the girl, he prepares to explain the true and strictly professional purpose of her purchase. Suddenly, Orza begins to strip off her tattered white dress with an innocent and incredibly happy expression. Zenon recoils in absolute panic, shouting at her to stop undressing right in front of him immediately. He stares at the girl's collar in frustration, wondering why she is being so forward and bold. The demi-human girl looks down at her bare legs, seemingly unaware of any social boundaries or modesty. She tilts her head in genuine confusion, asking if they weren't about to engage in standard reproductive activities. Poking her forehead, Zenon scolds her for being an idiot while explaining they are preparing for dungeon exploration. He clarifies that she was bought strictly for her combat potential and certainly not for any sexual favors. Mentioning the word dungeon causes Urza's eyes to light up with a frighteningly intense and hungry bloodlust. She jumps for joy at the prospect of battle, revealing the true nature of her war-loving ogre heritage. Reaching into his bag, Zenon acknowledges that he has indeed recruited a very enthusiastic and dangerous fighter. Orza gleefully promises to kill and plunder for her master, her innocent face masking a terrifying bloodlust. Zenon reaches into his magic bag, contemplating the dark nature of the loyal warrior he just recruited. Struggling to find a suitable response to her unsettling enthusiasm, he decides to focus on practical preparations. He displays the massive mountain of high-tier equipment recovered from the dungeon's secret treasure vault, explaining that he intentionally hoarded various items specifically to outfit any potential female comrades he might recruit. Zenon carefully selects a set of weapons and early-game accessories that perfectly complement her natural ogre strength. Instructing Urza to try on the gear, he promises to make adjustments if anything feels uncomfortable. Without hesitation, she begins to strip off her rags to change, once again ignoring all social modesty. Zenon remains silent, closing his eyes in exasperation at her complete lack of common human behavioral norms. Urza focuses on her new equipment, tightly fastening the leather gauntlets over her slender yet powerful forearms. She triumphantly reveals her new combat attire, a functional outfit designed for maximum mobility during intense battles. Admiring her reflection, she marvels at the high quality of human craftsmanship compared to her tribal gear. A massive iron-spiked club rests on the floor, its weight sufficient to crush most ordinary human warriors. She continues her enthusiastic confession, declaring that their meeting at the auction was a romantic and divine twist of fate. A rare drop requiring immense physical skill, often ignored by players due to weight. She swings the lethal kanabo with terrifying speed, declaring it a precious gift she will cherish forever. Nuzzling against him, she promises to slaughter any enemy that dares to stand in her master's way. Zenon flinches as she clings to him, her raw physical power making even an affectionate hug painful. He questions if her entire race is composed of battle-crazed maniacs, while observing her unsettling excitement. Orza declares her absolute love for her master while leaning against him, her massive weapon ready for war. Zenon questions why Orza has become so deeply attached to him, despite their very brief and transactional meeting. The young demi-human girl simply blinks in genuine surprise, unable to understand her master's sudden and confusing doubt. Reflecting on the situation, he realizes providing equipment shouldn't be enough to earn such an intense level of devotion. A heavy silence falls between them for a fleeting moment as she processes the unexpected question regarding her loyalty. Blushing intensely, Urza shyly confesses that she is actually quite superficial and deeply admires her new master's appearance. Zenon is left completely dumbfounded, struggling to comprehend that his intimidating features could ever be considered attractive. She nervously fidgets with her fingers while explaining how happy she is to belong to such a handsome gentleman. He recalls his sharp, hawk-like nose and predatory gaze that usually terrifies every other woman at the Magic Academy. Waving his hand in dismissal, he asks if she is truly serious about finding his villainous face appealing. Orza lists his frightening features with starry-eyed admiration, comparing him to a legendary and powerful war god from myth. Feeling his mental health depleting, he decides to accept her strange affection as long as it ensures her cooperation. Concluding that being liked is certainly preferable to being hated, he instructs her to follow him out immediately. Orza gleefully sprints after her savior, her massive iron weapon bouncing rhythmically against her shoulder with every step. Meanwhile, the auction official watches their departure with a knowing smirk as he locks the heavy wooden doors behind them. The merchant murmurs a crude comment about the young master's supposed nighttime prowess being just like his father's. Zenon grits his teeth in irritation, deciding that correcting the official's disgusting misconceptions is simply not worth the effort. The official bows low one last time, eagerly inviting the wealthy Baskerville heir to return for future high-end slave purchases. Walking away into the brightly lit city night, Zenon prepares to navigate the increasingly complex challenges of his new reality. Zenon walks through the city, marveling at how light Urza's footsteps are, despite her carrying such a massive club. Skipping happily behind him, Orza is surrounded by hearts as she thoroughly enjoys her new freedom and master. The pair ventures into a quiet back alley, avoiding the crowds as the moon begins to rise overhead. He notes that the walk back to the mansion will take an hour, preferring to return before darkness falls. Orza suddenly stops, her sharp senses detecting a presence hidden within the gloomy shadows of the narrow street. She reaches out and tugs on his sleeve, whispering a warning to alert him of the danger ahead. Zenon looks back in confusion, wondering why the girl has suddenly stopped skip-walking through the quiet city alley. His expression turns serious as he realizes they have been intentionally led into a trap by unknown pursuers. Three menacing thugs step into the light, blocking their path with weapons drawn and predatory smirks on faces. A thug with a sharp blade whispers to his comrade, ready to strike from the cover of shadows. Zenon glances over his shoulder as Urza peeks from behind him, wary of the thugs approaching from behind. A large gang of hired thugs completely encircles the pair, leaving them trapped in the middle of the street. Unfazed by the numerical disadvantage, Zenon tells Urza to stay back while he handles these petty and annoying pests. Three sets of heavy boots step into view, belonging to the elite guards of the vengeful, portly noble. The portly noble from the auction house reveals himself, having hired these men to reclaim the girl by force. Wearing a sinister and triumphant grin, he gloats about his plan to humiliate the arrogant Baskerville family heir. Zenon nonchalantly picks his nose, asking the man who he is, which drives the noble into a sputtering rage. He stares with a hollow expression, genuinely unable to place the face of his loud and obnoxious new enemy. Suddenly, the memory of the auction resurfaces, and he finally identifies the man he humiliated earlier that evening. Walking away, Zenon coldly thanks the noble for making the auction so unexpectedly expensive for his family's treasury. The portly noble seethes with rage, unable to accept his embarrassing defeat at the high-stakes auction. Zenon dismisses the man as a sore loser, questioning why he would bother approaching him now. The noble wears a creepy grin while suggesting they engage in a much more intimate meeting. He demands Zenon hand over the rare ogre girl, promising leniency if he complies immediately. Observing the situation, Zenon notes that the greedy man simply refuses to give up on her. Suddenly, a large group of hired thugs completely surrounds the pair in the quiet city street. Tension mounts as Zenon prepares to face the physical threat with his trademark villainous intensity. The noble persists with his disgusting demands, believing his superior numbers grant him absolute authority. Zenon stands his ground amidst the encirclement, casually contemplating his next move against the annoying pests. Cackling with malicious glee, the portly man assumes his victory is now entirely inevitable and certain. Before the fight begins, Zenon pauses to ask a very specific question regarding a derogatory term. The noble explains that the phrase refers to failed humans, a common insult for demi-human races. Orza listens while tilting her head, her innocence contrasting sharply with the hateful words being spoken. Zenon firmly declares that the girl belongs to him now, and he will never surrender her. The noble's expression darkens further as he realizes his attempts at intimidation have failed completely. His hired assassins draw their sharp blades, preparing to spill blood to reclaim the valuable slave. Mentioning his own prestigious family rank, Zenon warns that attacking a high-ranking noble carries consequences. Memories of the massive wealth spent at the auction flicker as gold coins fall through the air. The portly man screams about his ambitions, hoping to use the ogre to gain political influence. Zenon finally realizes the identity of the powerful figure backing this pathetic and greedy noble's actions. Zenon recognizes the man's exaggerated speech patterns. Recalling his identity from a specific part of the game's lore, he bluntly asks if the noble is actually an operative from the rival and powerful Kulom Kingdom, revealing that the mysterious figure the noble serves is likely the notorious and high-ranking Grand Marshal Zagatalos. The portly man roars in sheer, absolute shock that his secret political connections have been so easily exposed. Zenon observes the man's panicked reaction with bored indifference, finding his predictable behavior incredibly tiresome and unoriginal. A large circle of armed thugs slowly closes in, trapping the pair within the cobblestone city street. Tension peaks as the surrounding criminals wait for the signal to launch their coordinated and lethal physical assault. Regardless of the danger, the desperate noble continues to beg for the girl with a twisted, greasy smile. Zenon adopts a defiant and cool stance while considering the most efficient way to dispatch these annoying obstacles. The greedy merchant cackles maliciously, assuming his overwhelming numerical advantage guarantees a swift and total victory tonight. Dark, crackling energy begins to envelop Zenon's hands as his natural villainous blood starts to boil with excitement. He mocks the noble's confusion regarding how a simple student could possess such high-level and confidential information. The hired assassins draw their diverse weapons, preparing to spill blood to reclaim the valuable ogre tribe girl. Flashing a sinister smirk, Zenon welcomes the physical conflict while declaring that combat is truly his favorite specialty. A thug lunges forward with a sword, but Zenon executes a high-speed dodge with perfect and effortless timing. Moving like a blur of dark shadow, he launches into the group to systematically dismantle their coordinated formation. The sound of clashing steel echoes through the alley as he parries an incoming strike with a loud ring. Zenon and Orza stand together in the center of the fray, easily repelling the waves of incompetent attackers. He reflects on how reducing the enemy's numbers won't negatively impact the hero's intended path in this world. Standing over the defeated thugs, he offers a parting word to the girl who has officially become his ally. Zenon instructs Orza to prepare for her very first mission as his newly recruited subordinate, strictly commanding her to stay put and guard his blind spot while he handles the initial threat. Prompting a disappointed pout from the young demi-human who is eager to join the fray immediately. Meanwhile, Zenon retrieves a forbidden grimoire from his magic bag, which begins to pulse with ominous energy. The ancient book reveals complex runes that represent the terrifying and high-level nature of his dark arts. Glowing symbols float through the air, signaling the activation of a particularly destructive and cruel magical technique. Dark power surges through his veins as Zenon prepares to unleash a wave of absolute and crushing annihilation. The enraged noble roars for his hired assassins to execute the arrogant young man without any mercy. Zenon's gaze sharpens with a scanning effect, identifying every vital point of the charging enemies in an instant. Leaping into the air, he chants the lethal spell Blood Carpet to paint the street in crimson hues. Massive obsidian pillars erupt violently from the cobblestone floor, impaling the thugs before they can even react. Screams of agony echo through the alley as the dark magic tears through flesh with systematic efficiency. Observing the carnage with cold eyes, Zenon prepares for the next phase of his overwhelming counterattack. Orza finally launches herself forward, her massive iron-spiked club ready to deliver a bone-shattering finishing strike. Zenon pauses to reflect on the sheer cruelty of the dark magic he inherited from his family. Feeling a wave of intense nausea, he covers his mouth while processing the horrific power he wields. Zenon grants Orza permission to finish the remaining survivors, causing her to overflow with murderous excitement. His gaze lingers on her bloodthirsty expression as she prepares to execute her master's ruthless final orders. One of the surviving thugs stares upward in frozen horror, realizing his life is coming to an end. Orza brings her heavy weapon down with incredible force, crushing her terrified opponent in a single blow. The impact of Orza's club sends a guard flying through the air in a shower of blood. She lands gracefully, her gaze already scanning for the next target among the terrified group of mercenaries. Witnessing his elite guards fall like leaves, the portly noble trembles as his confidence turns into terror. One final assassin attempts a desperate overhead slash, hoping to catch the ogre girl off her guard. She stops the descending steel with perfect precision, her eyes glowing with an unsettling and predatory intensity. The noble's jaw drops as he witnesses the impossible feat of a child stopping a warrior's blade. Orza grips the sword with her bare fingers, the metal groaning under the pressure of her superhuman strength. Swinging her massive spiked club once more, she unleashes a devastating blow that ends the immediate physical threat. Returning to her master, she flashes a sweet smile while declaring that she has finished the task. A lone survivor grovels at Zenon's feet, weeping and pleading for his life to be spared today. Orza maintains a cold expression, reminding the coward that anyone threatening her master must be totally eliminated. A massive spike of dark energy catapults a body into the air with violent and explosive magical force. Throwing his head back, he laughs at the absurdity of the situation and his own growing power. Orza celebrates her victory with a happy leap, her massive weapon held aloft like a toy in hand. He rewards her loyalty with a gentle head pat, causing the girl to blush with pure, unfiltered joy. Turning his attention toward the groveling noble, he considers the best way to handle the remaining loose end. The frantic man screams about diplomatic immunity, claiming his death would cause a war between neighboring kingdoms. Zenon stands over the shallow graves, realizing that he must now carefully conceal his latest and darkest deeds. A colossal black serpent manifests from his swirling dark magic, its glowing eyes fixed on the doomed noble. He watches with a stoic profile as the manifestation of his will prepares to deliver the final judgment. As his dark magic snake strikes, Zenon notes a disturbing and complete lack of any lingering human guilt. He gazes down at the three thugs he just murdered, surprised by his own calculated indifference. The young noble wonders if he was chosen for this role because of his naturally dark personality. Trembling on the ground, the portly merchant desperately begs for his life while offering an enormous monetary bribe. Refusing the bribe with a sneer, the villainous heir declares he has no need for any additional gold. Orza gleefully launches into an attack, swinging her spiked club over the noble with terrifying physical power. The pathetic man screams in absolute horror as the young warrior toys with him before the blow. Preparing for a decisive strike, Orza raises her heavy weapon high while shouting an energetic battle cry. Suddenly her attention is diverted as a new presence manifests in the shadows of the city alleyway. A close-up reveals the merchant's sheer terror as he stares at a threat emerging from the darkness. Without warning, a sharp spike pierces the noble's body, ending his life with swift and silent precision. Both onlookers stand in utter shock as their intended target is executed by a sudden, lethal barrage. Zenon grinds his teeth, frustrated that he was completely unable to sense the newcomer's approach with magic. Sensing extreme danger, he immediately orders Orza to fall back while he prepares to face the intruder. The demi-human girl reacts with wide-eyed surprise, her playful mood replaced by a serious focus on her master. Scanning the surroundings with a sharp gaze, Zenon demands the hidden killer reveal their location immediately. Orza grips her club, her animalistic eyes scanning for the source of the lethal attack that just occurred. A single metal-armored boot steps into view from behind a corner, signaling a new and powerful threat. A voice addresses Lord Zenon Baskerville from the shadows, telling him that there is no need for caution. A mysterious masked warrior in a heavy cloak finally reveals themselves, leaving Zenon in absolute stunned silence. Zenon questions the mysterious intruder's identity, but decides to offer a quick word of thanks for the intervention. The masked figure introduces themselves as a member of the assassination organization, operating under the Baskerville family umbrella. Zenon asks if they are his father's spies, but the assassin reveals they were sent by someone named Lespold. The agent explains that high-spending auction customers are frequent targets for violent robbery, making constant protection absolutely necessary. Hearing the explanation, Zenon simply nods in understanding as he processes the harsh reality of this world's social dangers. Specifically, the assassin notes that auctions serve as a form of high-end entertainment and a risky purchasing method. Furthermore, these events are prime opportunities for nobles to publicly display their immense economic power to their peers. Zenon realizes that neglecting to hire guards after a massive purchase was essentially an open invitation for thieves. Despite the lapse, the assassin declares there was no need for worry given the young master's formidable combat skills. While he appreciates the praise, Zenon finds being evaluated as his father's successor to be deeply uninteresting and annoying. Turning his back on the carnage, he calls out to Orza to finally begin their journey back home. The mysterious agent bows deeply, promising to efficiently dispose of the scattered corpses while urging the master's safe return. Zenon and Orza walk away through the quiet cobblestone alleyway as the tension of the night finally begins to fade. The massive and imposing Baskerville mansion stands silent under the starlit sky, representing the heavy burden of his lineage. Later, he collapses onto his plush bed, letting out a long sigh of physical and mental exhaustion from the day. He reflects on his 2 weeks in this world, acknowledging that he has finally taken a human life today. Visualizing the fallen thugs, he concludes that he feels no regret since their deaths were necessary for his survival. However, he wonders if his lack of resistance to killing stems from his own nature or the original Zenon's influence. Considering Orza's combat-loving heritage, he understands why she can kill so easily without any visible hesitation or remorse. Staring at the ceiling, he questions why he feels absolutely no guilt after committing such a violent and lethal act. Zenon clenches his fist, resolving to push past any hesitation regarding the lethal actions he must eventually take. Since the game world is teeming with dangerous monsters, fanatical cultists, and cutthroat thieves who show no mercy, acknowledging that ruthless efficiency is a vital strength, He finds comfort in having finally secured Urza's absolute loyalty. Having such a powerful comrade significantly raises his survival rate as they stand before another daunting dungeon entrance. However, he notes that a party of just two physical attackers is strategically unbalanced without magic and healing. Considering the main scenario is still in its infancy, he decides there is no immediate need to rush further. Suddenly, Urza bursts into his room covered in soap suds and wrapped only in a thin, white bath towel. The sheer, unexpected shock of her revealing state causes Xenon's nose to bleed uncontrollably from the visual stimulation. She lunges at him in a panic, tearfully wailing that her eyes are burning from the maid's human soap. The young demi-human clings to him desperately, her face pressed against him while she continues to sob from pain. Soon after, a blushing Leviana enters the room wearing only a towel, horrified to find the girl hugging him. Xenon remains frozen in total, wide-eyed disbelief as the chaotic and highly suggestive situation escalates further around him. He finds himself unable to look away from the overwhelming and unexpected sight of the two women before him. Leviana frantically explains that she was still washing Urza's hair when the girl suddenly bolted away in a panic. Meanwhile, the little ogre continues to rub her eyes and complain loudly about the stinging sensation of the soap. Xenon realizes he is now completely soaked, deducing that Urza likely opened her eyes while being washed by Leviana. He notes that the maid has no hope of pulling the girl away because of the ogre's superhuman strength. With a soft and loving gaze, Leviana suggests that her master should join them in the bath as well. Her bold and unexpected proposal leaves him even more stunned than before, his heart racing with intense nervous energy. Finally, he erupts in a loud and panicked shout of disbelief as the chaotic bedroom encounter reaches its peak. Leviana teases a flustered Xenon about his unprecedented shyness, despite their long and intimate history together, prompting him to realize that his predecessor and the maid shared a far deeper bond than initially suspected. As he envisions the explicit past encounters that define the original villain's twisted relationship with his servant, subsequently clutching his head in agony while cursing the depraved legacy of the body he now inhabits. He eventually decides that continuing their routine is the only way to maintain his secret and survive. While blushing profusely as he convinces himself that joining her is a necessary sacrifice for the mission. Soon he follows Leviana down the grand hallway toward the estate's luxurious and steam-filled bathing chamber, where her swaying figure in a thin towel provides a constant and overwhelming distraction for the noble, causing his mind to spiral into chaotic swirls of panic while he attempts to remain composed. The sensory overload continues within the steam as bubbles and physical proximity pushes limits further. In the meantime, a cheerful Orza takes charge of washing his shoulders with gentle and affectionate movements. Plus, a playful Leviana winks while offering high praise for the demi-human girl's domestic skills and effort. Eventually, the trio settles into the massive, ornate tub for a surreal and incredibly awkward group soak. While Xenon fights a losing battle against a nosebleed, dizzy from the sheer amount of visual stimuli. Afterward, a sleepy Orza in pajamas insists on spending the night within her master's warm bed, prompting him to lunge forward to silence her scandalous demands before the entire household can hear them. Although Leviana sternly reminds the girl of her own room, the stubborn ogre remains completely immovable. He ultimately reaches a compromise that finds him cradling the small, nuzzling warrior as she drifts off. However, the presence of a sighing, semi-nude maid right beside him only adds to his mounting distress. Finally, he lies awake in the darkness, screaming internally about the total impossibility of finding rest tonight. Xenon screams into the void, questioning why his life has transformed into this exhausting and suggestive endurance trial. He desperately swears to any listening gods that he remains perfectly innocent despite the compromising circumstances. Morning light finally breaks over the Baskerville estate, marking the end of a long and sleepless night. The young noble lies motionless, staring blankly as the weight of his new reality slowly sinks in. Reaching toward the ornate ceiling, he realizes he has survived his first true test of willpower and sanity. But seeing his companions still clinging to him in their sleep, his feelings of frustration quickly return. A dangerous thought crosses his mind about simply giving in to the temptation to end his suffering. Yet looking at Urza's peaceful, innocent sleeping face, he immediately dismisses his own momentary and dark impulses. He wonders how the demi-human would even react to his more adult or villainous behavior toward the maid. Questioning her age, he tries to justify his recruitment of such a young-looking warrior for his cause. He blushes intensely, struggling to reconcile his modern Japanese morals with the wild nature of his subordinates. Firmly reminding himself that she was acquired strictly for battle, he rejects any other confusing or forbidden ideas. Nevertheless, he stares at her, pondering if ogre tribes age differently and if she is actually older. If she truly possessed an adult soul, he might finally feel permitted to lower his guard around her. He frantically scratches his head, realizing that the extreme lack of sleep is making his thoughts completely nonsensical. Orza continues her relentless nuzzling, seemingly oblivious to the internal storm raging within her master's exhausted mind. She finally awakens with a cheerful and sweet greeting, a sharp contrast to his own miserable and sleepless state. Zenon is trapped between the two, realizing that regardless of her true age, she still behaves like a child. Soon, Leviana also begins to stir, her sleepy gaze and seductive aura once again testing his legendary self-control. She politely asks if he rested well, completely unaware of the mental war he waged throughout the long night. Zenon struggles with his lingering embarrassment, while Leviana prepares to begin their daily morning routine. The loyal maid quickly finishes dressing and promises to have a nourishing breakfast ready shortly. Orza watches with intense hunger as a lavish spread of eggs and croissants is served. Before departing, Zenon spends a quiet moment honing his skills in the estate's vast training courtyard. Finally dressed in his sharp academy uniform, he announces his departure while Orza follows closely. The young demi-human girl looks up expectantly, ready for her first day in the human world. Arriving at the grand entrance, Zenon reminds her of the specific behavior he expects from her. Orza enthusiastically pumps her fist, promising to remain calm and avoid any unnecessary physical conflict. Satisfied with her resolve, he confirms that bringing her along was always his primary intention. They join the crowd of students, many of whom are accompanied by their own personal attendants. The upcoming curriculum involves dangerous dungeon crawls and monster hunting missions beyond the city walls. Walking toward the carriage, he issues one final warning about the strict rules regarding school conduct. With sparkling eyes, Orza vows to be a model subordinate to ensure she remains by his side. Zenon can only manage a skeptical look, wondering if she can actually maintain such perfect discipline. The carriage door slams shut, signaling the start of their historic journey toward the prestigious academy. As the horses trot away, the mansion staff waves farewell to their young master and his guest. Orza gasps in wonder while pressing her face against the glass to see the bustling city streets. She hums a cheerful tune, her infectious energy filling the interior of the luxurious moving carriage. Bouncing on her seat, she expresses her pure joy at finally attending school with her beloved master. Meanwhile, Zenon remains silent, lost in deep thought regarding the many challenges awaiting them both. Orza hums a strange tune in the carriage, making Zenon wonder what she finds so incredibly amusing. The luxurious horse-drawn carriage rattles through the city, while the little ogre girl's singing echoes inside. When Zenon asks if she is enjoying herself, she enthusiastically confirms her pure and unfiltered happiness. Suddenly, her lyrics turn dark and bloodthirsty, shocking her master with her innate and terrifying ogre nature. A wave of intense anxiety washes over Zenon as he processes her casual remarks about lethal violence. The carriage finally arrives at the grand gates of the Royal Academy under a clear morning sky. Orza hops out of the vehicle with boundless energy, while Zenon steps onto the prestigious school grounds. Nearby students freeze in total disbelief, their faces filled with confusion and wary curiosity at the pair. Whispers ripple through the crowd as they recognize the infamous Baskerville family crest on the black carriage. The young demi-human girl gazes back with sparkling eyes, seemingly oblivious to the rising social tension around her. Classmates murmur about her obvious horns and the heavy slave collar, marking her as his personal property. Zenon acknowledges that they have become far more conspicuous than he had ever originally anticipated or desired. Orza remains blissfully happy, her eyes shining like stars because she is finally attending school with him. She boldly points toward the horizon, declaring that she will personally lead the way to their classroom. However, Zenon reminds her that she has no idea where they are going, ordering her behind him. The duo marches through the massive stone plaza while students part like the sea to avoid them. Orza maintains a radiant and innocent expression, contrasting sharply with the dark rumors following her master. Despite her cute appearance, Zenon feels a deep sense of unease regarding her adaptation to academy life. He recalls the brutal history of the battle-crazed ogre tribe from the northern continents of this world. Eventually, he tries to convince himself that as long as she behaves, no major trouble will occur. Zenon sighs deeply, his dark circles revealing the intense physical and mental exhaustion from his sleepless night, prompting a concerned Orza to wonder if her master is suffering from a sudden and painful stomachache. The young demi-human girl tugs gently on his sleeve, seeking reassurance while looking up with wide eyes. While patting her head, Zenon dismisses her worries and focuses on the grand academy looming before them. He confidently declares that avoiding trouble is easy as long as they simply follow the established rules. The massive and ornate academy building stands as a silent witness to the gathering crowd of noble students. However, Zenon suddenly realizes he may have overlooked one incredibly significant and potentially catastrophic social factor. He notes that trouble doesn't always originate from oneself. Sometimes it arrives unbidden from the outside world. Leon Brave roars across the stone plaza, his voice filled with righteous fury as he confronts Zenon. Zenon glares back with an intense and annoyed expression, his patience rapidly evaporating under the hero's scrutiny. The legendary protagonist stands firm, his body language signaling an immediate and hostile confrontation in the square. Pointing an accusing finger, Leon condemns the act of keeping a young girl in a slave collar. He shouts that he was a fool for ever believing that a Baskerville could truly be reformed. Clicking his tongue, Zenon mutters about how incredibly troublesome and annoying the hero's interference has become. He considers how to handle this unexpected deviation from the main scenario, while Leon continues his tirade. The two rivals lock eyes in a fierce stare-down as the atmosphere around them grows increasingly heavy. Clutching his head, Zenon laments that reality is far more chaotic and unpredictable than any digital game. Leon demands the girl's immediate release, his unyielding sense of justice driving him toward a reckless action. Zenon calmly acknowledges her status as a slave, while questioning why the hero finds it so problematic. He explains that he followed every legal procedure and academy rule regarding the inclusion of personal attendants. Leon shouts in a fury, accusing Zenon of being a shameless monster for enslaving such a young girl. Ciel Uranus joins the fray, her eyes burning with a righteous indignation that matches her heroic childhood friend. Zenon sighs internally, recognizing that Ciel's arrival only complicates the situation due to her sensitivity towards social injustice. Bystanders begin to murmur amongst themselves, wondering if the legendary hero will resort to force to liberate the girl. Images of kidnappers and thieves flash through Zenon's mind as he explains the legal protections afforded to registered slaves. Leon and Ciel reel in frustration, struggling to find a moral argument against the cold reality of the law. Zenon remains perfectly composed, his villainous face masking the growing boredom he feels during this redundant and tiresome confrontation. Unexpectedly, Leon demands to know the price for Urza's freedom, offering to buy her back with his own gold. Zenon reflects on how classic RPG protagonists are always willing to waste immense time and resources on noble detours. He acknowledges that while their hearts are in the right place, their idealistic methods are often incredibly inefficient and bothersome. Leon pauses in confusion as Zenon dismisses his offer without a second thought. Maintaining his cold and distant demeanor, gently patting Urza's head, Zenon prepares to depart, telling the hero that they should simply focus on their classes. Leon roars in a blind rage, unable to accept being ignored by the man he considers his ultimate rival. Suddenly, Leon launches a powerful punch toward Zenon, his patience finally snapping under the weight of his own morality. The surrounding students gasp in shock, whispering that Leon is the one in the wrong for initiating unprovoked violence. Zenon closes his eyes and prepares to accept the blow, realizing that playing the victim is strategically more advantageous. A sharp sound echoes through the plaza as a small foot stomps firmly onto the hard cobblestone city floor. Orza lets out a terrifying scream, declaring that she will never forgive anyone who dares to touch her master. Leaping high into the air, the tiny warrior brandishes her massive spiked club with a truly frightening and murderous intent. Leon's eyes widen in absolute terror as he realizes the adorable little girl is actually a bloodthirsty engine of destruction. Orza swings her massive spiked club with terrifying speed, aiming to crush the hero where he stands. Leon barely avoids the blow as the girl launches an aggressive aerial assault in the plaza. The iron weapon smashes the floor, sending stone shards flying with explosive and dangerous force. Orza's eyes glow with feline intensity, revealing the true bloodlust inherent to her warrior ogre race. She charges forward like a wild beast, determined to eliminate anyone threatening her master's life. A panicked Leon desperately pleads for peace while struggling to block her relentless physical strikes. Orza screams a vow of absolute destruction, ignoring everything but the enemy standing directly before her. Sparks erupt from clashing metal as the spiked club meets the hero's defensive sword. Leon struggles beneath the crushing weight, begging the girl to see he is not her enemy. Seal Uranus frantically reaches out to stop the violence, her voice lost in the battle's chaos. Further discussion is declared completely useless as the young warrior focuses entirely on her murderous goal. Students scramble away in a chaotic frenzy while the tiny engine of war continues her assault. Zenon watches with a nervous sweat, realizing his new subordinate is far more terrifying than anticipated. Snapping out of his daze, he recognizes a master's duty is to control his unruly servants. He bellows for her to stop immediately, ordering her to stand down before someone gets killed. The girl promises swift death to his rivals, her mind consumed by the thrill of the hunt. Zenon demands she listen to his voice, shouting over the deafening roar of her own bloodlust. He recognizes the dangerous truth that ogres lose all sense of their surroundings during intense combat. He struggles to reclaim his lost authority while the situation spirals further out of his control. Terrified classmates scream for the academy instructors to intervene before a tragedy occurs on school grounds. Panic spreads as students flee from the escalating violence erupting in the middle of the school square. Zenon realizes that he must intervene immediately to stop Urza's rampage, even at the cost of injury. The young warrior continues her relentless assault, while Zenon vows to prevent the hero's premature death today. Gathering his resolve, the noble heir lunges forward into the fray to personally restrain his wild subordinate. Orza swings her massive weapon once more, her bloodlust driving her to deliver a bone-crushing final strike. Zenon watches in stunned silence as the outcome of the brief and chaotic encounter suddenly unfolds before him. Horrified spectators shield their eyes from the brutal display of physical power occurring right in their midst. A heavy impact rings out as Zenon executes a swift and decisive physical intervention to end the fight. Leon's expression transforms into one of absolute and agonizing shock as he suffers an unexpected and painful blow. A cloud of dust and comedic bubbles rise from the point of impact, signaling a sudden shift in tone. Catapulted backward, the legendary hero groans in pathetic defeat while his classmates watch in total disbelief. Students gasp in horror at the sight of their top-ranked peer being neutralized so quickly and easily. Leon collapses to the cobblestone floor in utter agony, clutching himself while the surrounding crowd watches in shock. Regardless of the hero's state, Orza prepares to deliver a finishing blow to ensure her master's safety. Zenon finally snaps out of his momentary daze, realizing the lethal danger still facing his fallen rival. Reaching out with a steady hand, he commands his subordinate to halt her violent and murderous pursuit immediately. He firmly grabs the girl's head, ordering her to stay while she looks up with a flustered expression. Blushing intensely, Orza asks a scandalous and confusing question that leaves her master feeling completely and utterly speechless. Zenon scolds her for her ridiculous misunderstanding, his face a mixture of annoyance and deep social embarrassment. Meanwhile, a concerned instructor arrives on the scene as students frantically report the chaotic battle that just occurred. Classmates crowd around the fallen hero, while Zenon coldly decides to leave the chaotic scene behind him. Leading a blushing Orza away, he prepares to deal with the social fallout of the unexpected Plaza battle. Zenon sweats profusely while mentally apologizing for the immense trouble he has unintentionally caused for the academy. The surrounding students stare in shock as their top-ranked peer remains completely motionless on the hard stone pavement. Leon lies unconscious and foaming at the mouth after suffering a single overwhelming blow from the little girl. Academy medical staff eventually arrive to carry the defeated representative away on a stretcher for immediate treatment. Classmates begin to murmur about the incident, questioning how the legendary hero could lose to a small child. Rumors quickly spread that the ogre girl was merely defending her master from Leon's unprovoked and violent aggression. Students whisper that Leon might have violated school rules by attempting to forcibly seize someone else's registered property. Later that day, an academy instructor meets with Zenon to discuss the specifics of the morning's public confrontation. The administration chooses to overlook the matter, wishing to avoid any unnecessary political conflict with the Baskerville family. Zenon harshly scolds Orza in the hallway, threatening to ban her from school if she rampages ever again. The young warrior tearfully promises to behave herself as they finally head toward their next scheduled magic lecture. Entering the hall, the student rescued from the gargoyle waves enthusiastically to greet the notorious Baskerville heir. Zenon looks on with a confused and blank expression, unable to recall the identity of the boy waving. The boy reminds him of their dungeon struggle, expressing his deep and sincere gratitude for being saved earlier. Meanwhile, groups of female students continue to whisper about the shocking news regarding Leon's embarrassing public defeat. Zenon acknowledges his growing reputation as a villain, lamenting that his scary face makes him an easy target. His new friend leads them to seats while noting that walking with a collared slave looks like a crime. Winking, the boy jokes that Zenon's naturally intimidating features are the primary reason for everyone's negative assumptions. Zenon snaps at his classmate to ignore his naturally frightening face, which others find strangely intense. Classmate A's prejudice vanishes after being saved. Finally seeing the man behind the dark Baskerville reputation, Seal Uranus suddenly ambushes Orza with an affectionate hug, squealing about how adorable the young ogre is. Hugging Orza tightly, Seal shamelessly asks to keep the girl as a decoration for her room. Zenon warns Seal to be gentle since Orza isn't accustomed to humans. While the ogre growls, his new friend continues to chat cheerfully, seemingly unfazed by Zenon's notorious and scary social status. A small, genuine smile crosses Zenon's face as he inwardly acknowledges and appreciates the boy's unexpected goodwill. Suddenly, Ciel Uranus kicks open the double doors, her presence radiating a wild and intense aura. Fuming with visible rage, Ciel's intense glare suggests she is still harboring a very serious grudge. Classmate A warns Zenon about the terrifying nature of a woman's resentment, while the noble looks exhausted. Zenon laments being held responsible for Urza's actions, feeling the heavy weight of his supervisor duties. The instructor finally enters the large lecture hall to officially begin the day's magic and theory lesson. Orza demands to be released from the persistent and unwanted physical affection, while looking visibly annoyed. In contrast, Ciel remains obsessed with the ogre girl, shouting her name with pure, unfiltered excitement. The Grand Academy building stands silent under the passing clouds as several quiet school days eventually pass. Leon's desk remains conspicuously empty for several days, signaling the hero's continued absence from his regular classes. Students gather in the massive dining hall, enjoying their meals while gossiping about the legendary protagonist's defeat. Eating a simple snack, Zenon assumes Leon needs more time to recover from his psychological shock. His friend questions if a week is far too long for a hero to remain in seclusion. Zenon observes his lavish lunch, enjoying the unprecedented peace and quiet provided by the hero's sudden absence. Ciel Uranus stands in the hallway, her expression shifting from disappointment to a dark and simmering resentment. Sparks of magical energy flicker around her head as her anger reaches a dangerous boiling point. She aggressively gulps down a drink, her eyes fixed in a terrifying glare toward an unseen target. Meanwhile, Zenon calmly eats his lunch, noting that Leon continues to watch him with silent hostility. A kind female classmate approaches Orza, offering the young demi-human a delicious-looking snack to try. Soon a group of girls gathers around Orza, enthusiastically presenting a variety of tempting desserts and treats. Orza shouts with pure excitement, her eyes widening at the prospect of finally having a massive feast. The young warrior practically glows with happiness while being served a mountain of burgers and meat dishes. Other students squeal in delight, finding the tiny ogre's voracious appetite to be incredibly charming and cute. Zenon rests his head on his hand, realizing Urza's popularity is successfully softening his own villainous reputation. Classmates watch in awe as Orza stuffs her cheeks, comparing her adorable eating habits to a hungry hamster. However, she quickly snaps back, demanding they stop treating her like a simple and defenseless child. The cafeteria buzzes with energy as the girls continue to pamper the ogre, while Zenon watches silently. Sunlight bathes the Grand Academy towers, signaling the passage of time since the chaotic Plaza incident occurred. Zenon's friend notes Leon's continued absence. While Zenon admits the hero likely suffered a severe psychological blow, the boy's face contorts in vicarious pain as he recalls the sheer brutality of the girl's defensive strike. He shivers violently while recalling the hero's painful defeat, acknowledging he would be completely traumatized in that position. Pointing out the hero's ultimate foolishness, he questions why Leon would ever recklessly attempt to seize another slave. Zenon sips his tea in silence, sharing the same doubts about the protagonist's impulsive and reckless behavior. The narrative reflects on Leon's hot-headed sense of justice, showing him prepared for his next inevitable battle. Zenon contemplates Leon's simplistic worldview, noting that such reckless heroism is far more troublesome in the real world. For reality isn't clearly divided into black and white, leaving many gray areas that heroes often ignore entirely. Meanwhile, he continues his lunch while processing the strange social dynamics currently unfolding within the Academy's busy cafeteria. Realizing that sometimes it is better to simply overlook minor social friction to maintain a peaceful school life. His new friend chats cheerfully as groups of students continue to pamper the perpetually hungry ogre girl nearby. Seinen sips his drink, hoping for a future where everyone can finally find a way to understand one another. Because developing sufficient power remains the only way to eventually and decisively defeat the looming threat of the Demon King. Observing the aftermath of Orza's massive feast, he suggests they finally depart the dining hall for their next class. The pair exits the cafeteria, leaving behind the chaotic energy of their peers to navigate the quiet school hallways. As they walk, Orza trots ahead happily, while Zenon maintains a vigilant eye on their surroundings for any trouble. Suddenly, he stops and peeks through a classroom door window, sensing an unsettling and familiar magical presence nearby. He discovers a group of aggressive male students surrounding Aerys, the Academy's highly revered and talented saint. The boys press her to join their party as a healer, their tones shifting toward a forced and unwanted recruitment. Aerys clutches her hands to her chest, looking visibly distressed and uncomfortable under their persistent and overbearing pressure. Zenon acknowledges the predatory nature of these high-ranking nobles who treat talented women like mere tools for their success. Standing in the hallway, he evaluates the situation while Orza watches the confrontation with a mix of curiosity. The duo remains hidden behind the doorframe, observing the escalating tension within the quiet and empty classroom. A sudden realization strikes him as he recognizes this pivotal moment as a primary recruitment flag for Leon's party. Unexpectedly, Leon Brave enters the scene, signaling the start of the scripted rescue event that Zenon previously anticipated. Aerys trembles in fear, trapped between the walls and the greedy ambitions of her peers as the scene intensifies. Zenon recalls the game's script where a hand would stop the harassment with a firm command. Imagining the noble hero Leon Brave declaring that Aerys must join his own party instead, he visualizes the protagonist's intense and heroic expression that originally won the young saint's heart. Envisioning the shocked faces of the bullies as they recoil from the main character's overwhelming presence. In his memory, the hero takes Aerys by the hand to lead her away from the conflict. He pictures the saint's grateful and blushing face as she experiences her first spark of true love. According to the original story, this act of courage establishes the deep bond necessary for her recruitment. Zenon sighs while remembering this iconic scene, acknowledging how different things are in this new reality. He stares through the window at the empty courtyard, realizing that the intended savior is nowhere nearby. Deciding to mind his own business, he starts walking down the quiet hallway with Orza following behind. Suddenly, he stops as a shocking realization hits him regarding the hero's continued and unexplained absence. Orza stumbles and lets out a confused sound after bumping into her master's back during his pause. She asks what has caught his attention, while Zenon stares back toward the window with intense focus. He worries that the trauma from his previous victory has completely broken the legendary hero's spirit. A pale and visibly distressed Aerys is shown, highlighting her current and very real state of vulnerability. The saint remains surrounded by the aggressive trio of students, her predicament remaining entirely unresolved and dangerous. From a high vantage point, the small group appears isolated and vulnerable amidst the school's vast grounds. Peeking carefully through the window frame, Zenon's expression turns sharp as he evaluates the escalating social threat. An arrogant noble boasts about his family status, attempting to use his father's title to intimidate Aerys. The saint stands in troubled silence, her eyes reflecting her growing sense of hopelessness and isolated despair. Aerys reluctantly agrees to accompany a group of male students for just one specific occasion. Bowing her head, she formally asks for their cooperation despite the temporary nature of their arrangement. The boisterous boys celebrate their success, planning a dangerous dungeon excursion immediately after their classes end. A shadow of deep discomfort crosses her face as she processes her current and unfortunate predicament. A predatory hand reaches out to touch her, marking the beginning of a very unsettling development. She stares ahead with hollow eyes, seemingly resigned to the cruel fate unfolding before her. The trio leads the saint away, their loud laughter echoing through the peaceful academy grounds. Zenon watches from afar, realizing that mere mob characters are attempting to steal a primary heroine. He peeks through a window, questioning what the hero Leon intends to do about this crisis. Those opportunistic students smirk with malicious intent, completely unaware of the narrative weight of their actions. Sliding down the wall in a panic, Zenon fears Leon's growth will stagnate without Aerys' support. He paces the hallway in deep frustration, while Orza follows quietly in the distance. Students gather in the lecture hall, discussing their plans for the upcoming free practice period. Some suggest visiting the tutorial dungeon, while others prefer staying at the academy's safe training grounds. Zenon observes the scene with a sharp, calculating gaze, his mind racing with several tactical possibilities. Meanwhile, the three boys continue to pressure Aerys into joining their reckless and ill-conceived party. He clicks his tongue in sheer annoyance, finding the current state of affairs incredibly dull and frustrating. The group decides to challenge the dungeon of the King of the Cave, relying on her healing. Narration describes the golem-filled beginner dungeon located just outside the bustling capital city's walls. With a proper balance party, this cave is usually considered a simple training ground for novice adventurers. Zenon contemplates the dungeon's safety, concluding that no one should die unless something extreme happens. He slams his hands down, declaring that moping is useless, and decides to head to a dungeon. Acknowledging that staying in the classroom will only dampen his spirits, he seeks a quick distraction. Zenon turns away from the empty desks, walking toward the exit to find some action elsewhere. Orza trots after him, curiously inquiring about her master's destination and next course of action. He stretches his arms, settling on the nearby sage's training ground to avoid a long journey. The demi-human girl asks why he isn't chasing the woman from before, leaving him completely flabbergasted. Orza stares intently, claiming his expression betrayed a clear desire to follow the departing group. Taken aback by her blunt observation, Zenon frantically tries to maintain his cool and detached persona. He marvels at how easily she read him, feeling exposed by his own subordinate's sharp intuition. Despite her bloodthirsty nature, he realizes she is surprisingly perceptive regarding the emotions of others. She urges him to move quickly before they disappear, her excitement for potential conflict clearly visible. Zenon grabs her and insists that he has no intention of intervening in the hero's story. Meanwhile, the trio leads the saint away, their forceful recruitment technically remaining within the school rules. He reminds himself that saving the main heroines is a task strictly reserved for the hero Leon. Visualizing a dark outcome, he fears that personally rescuing her would trigger the sequel's predatory flags. Orza looks down sadly, questioning why her master wears such a pained and conflicted expression. Zenon stands in the hallway, his internal battle between duty and morality finally reaching a boiling point. Dark energy surges through his mind as he realizes that he cannot simply turn a blind eye. Covering his face in shame, he accepts that his own kindness makes him a very poor villain. Orza strikes a confident pose, humming a cheerful tune while waiting for her master's next move. Shortly after, she points a finger upward to explain the simple and violent logic of her tribe. Visualizing a world of predatory hunger, she describes how her people always eat before they think. While Zenon laments her muscle brain philosophy, she suggests finding enemies to punch for stress relief. Subsequently, he sighs at the sheer absurdity of belonging to a race that lives for battle. Suddenly, a wave of genuine laughter escapes his lips as he realizes how ridiculous he's been. Deciding to abandon his schemes, Zenon gently pats Urza's head while finally embracing a simpler path. Despite the risks, he acknowledges that Leon will eventually pay the price for any narrative disruptions. Moments later, a heavy stone shatters under their resolve as they prepare for immediate action. With a firm and decisive step, the pair prepares to leave their lingering doubts behind them. Then Zenon and Orza sprint across the academy grounds, his voice booming with newfound villainous freedom. Meanwhile, the loyal demi-human girl cheers for her master, her eyes sparkling with absolute devotion. Flashing a dark and excited grin, he declares his intention to live exactly how he chooses. Thereafter, they charge toward their destination with incredible speed, leaving a trail of dust behind. Looking down, a quiet town sits peacefully near the outskirts of the dungeon, where their trial awaits. As they enter, a dark and ominous tunnel looms ahead, marking the entrance to the labyrinth. Immediately, dozens of glowing, predatory eyes peer from the pitch-black shadows, sensing fresh prey nearby. Finally reaching the inner sanctum, Zenon unsheathes his blade and prepares to conquer the final room. Abruptly, a massive stone golem lunges forward, attacking the intruders with a heavy rocky fist. Zenon counters the incoming blow with a predatory smile while preparing his lethal, magical blade. Orza charges forward with her massive spike club, leaving the tactical planning entirely to her master. A leathery lizard monster shrieks in primal defiance, unaware of the overwhelming physical power about to strike. She delivers a bone-shattering blow with her heavy weapon, easily overpowering the dungeon's minor inhabitants. With a fierce battle cry, the young warrior demands the complete destruction of her unfortunate opponent. The massive Kanabo slams down with explosive force, reducing the rock-skinned creature to mere splinters. Zenon stands frozen in total disbelief, struggling to process the raw violence of his new subordinate. Across the cavern, Orza becomes a whirlwind of destruction, systematically dismantling every monster in her path. Her eyes glow with an unsettling bloodlust while she gleefully shouts for the total annihilation of enemies. Nothing remains of the lizard pack but scattered debris and the haunting silence of a total slaughter. A nervous laugh escapes Zenon as he realizes that his own sword might be completely unnecessary. He rewards her incredible performance with a gentle head pat, causing the battle-crazed girl to beam. Grinning broadly, he acknowledges that she is truly a formidable partner for someone with his reputation. The pair reaches a long stone staircase, leading deeper into the dungeon's more dangerous lower levels. Descending into the gloom, Zenon notes that the earlier students must be making impressive progress too. Suddenly, a colossal stone bear erupts from the shadows, its massive rocky frame dwarfing the young adventurers. The beast lets out a territorial roar, bearing crystalline teeth that could easily crush enchanted armor. Orza launches herself into the air with lethal intent, ignoring Zenon's half-started warning to be cautious. She swings her iron-spiked club with a desperate scream, focusing all her ogre strength into one strike. The massive guardian collapses onto the cavern floor, leaving a speechless Zenon to question her insane power. Wiping her brow with a satisfied smile, Orza takes a brief moment to enjoy her victory. Zenon laments his lack of real combat since the gargoyle encounter, unable to even warm up properly. Firmly instructing Orza to stay back, he decides to handle the upcoming monster by himself. Orza protests frantically, desperate to protect her master from any potential harm in the dungeon. He refuses her assistance with a stern command, leaving the young demi-human in a state of tearful shock. Declaring he is no weakling needing constant protection, Zenon prepares to face the growling stone bear alone. The massive beast looms in the darkness, its rocky hide and sharp claws promising a difficult challenge ahead. A chilling, predatory smile spreads across Zenon's face as he welcomes the chance to test his skills. Unleashing a deafening roar, the monster raises its heavy arms to crush the arrogant human before it. Remaining perfectly composed, Zenon mocks the creature's slow movements with a confident and unsettling smirk. The bear lunges with a powerful swipe, yet the magic swordsman evades the lethal claws with effortless grace. He taunts the beast, revealing that he has already completely memorized its predictable and repetitive attack patterns. Steel meets stone as he drives his blade deep into the monster's reinforced hide with clinical precision. Recognizing the telegraph for a charge, Zenon watches as the bear prepares to launch itself forward. Leaping into the air, he avoids the earth-shattering impact while his long coat flutters in the wind. The snarling predator baits its teeth in fury, its animalistic eyes glowing with an intense and murderous light. Landing firmly, he readies himself for one final, decisive strike to end the tiresome battle. Moving like a blur, Zenon soars over the massive guardian, positioning himself for a fatal counteroffensive. Crystals shatter under the pressure of his sword as he repeatedly punctures the bear's magical weak points. Trembling and broken, the colossal stone bear stumbles backward, its immense life force finally starting to dwindle. Zenon launches into the air, raising his blade high to deliver a crushing finishing blow to his foe. Zenon unleashes a powerful battle cry, focusing his entire strength into a singular and final offensive strike. Plunging his blade deep into the stone bear's foundation, he initiates the creature's final collapse. A barrage of rapid slashes tears through the golem's rocky exterior, sending shattered debris flying everywhere. The monster's legs crumble under the relentless pressure, signaling the definitive end of its territorial defense. With an earth-shaking thud, the guardian disintegrates into a pile of rubble within the dark cavern. Sheathing his sword, Zenin casually asks Urza if she is satisfied with his display of power. The young demi-human girl overflows with admiration, clinging to her master while praising his peerless strength. Several defeated stone bears litter the hallway, serving as silent monuments to their overwhelming combat efficiency. Zenin explains he can fight mid-class monsters solo using game knowledge despite low skill levels. He warns Urza not to get careless, as dungeons can trigger sudden and highly dangerous encounters. Another creature lunges from the shadows, only to be met by Zenin's perfectly timed and lethal slash. Mocking his opponent, he declares that their predictable movements have already been completely committed to memory. Orza watches her master with an unsettling, wide-eyed fascination as he displays his absolute technical dominance. They move past a massive mound of slain lizard monsters, littering the path through the lower chambers. Reaching the 8th floor, the scenery shifts into a dense forest of sharp and jagged stone stalactites. Zenin advises caution due to the limited visibility, while his subordinate responds with an energetic affirmation. Spinning her heavy spiked club, Urza gleefully promises to eliminate any enemy that dares cross them.